This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 10, extraordinary news there from America with regard to that Jack Smith filing. We will be finding out a little bit more about that in the course of this hour. Of course, as a phone-in host, I have a weird compulsion to look for a topic in every single thing that happens. Sometimes there are topics, sometimes there aren't. But I don't know with the Trump stuff now. I don't know what matters. If you are a Donald Trump supporter, whether you have a vote in the American election or not, you do not care about things that are true. You do not care about facts. You do not care about crimes. You do not care about attempted coups. You do not care about the painting of targets upon the back of your own vice president. It's all gone. So those of us who make a living out of trying to unravel things or trying to understand things better remain at a bit of a loss with regard to Trump. And of course, the pound shop version of Donald Trump in this country is Nigel Farage, widely sort of seen as one of the poles towards which the Conservative Party may move, with the other pole being the Liberal Democrats. And I find this really interesting. I have to be honest with you. I did a politics A-level. Sometimes it's easy to forget the fact that we are, however you look at it, and whatever you may think about some of the individuals concerned, we are always living in history. Everything that we do, politically, everything that happens in politics will be studied one day. You know, what will the essay question about the Conservative Party in the first half of the second decade, third decade of the 21st century be? What will the A-level question be 10 years from now? Will it be account for the disappearance of the Conservative Party between 2024 and 2030? Will it be explain how the Conservative Party recovered from the electoral annihilation of 2024? Gosh, I never know what's going to come out of my mouth before the light comes on, but that's really interesting, isn't it? What will the A-level question be in 2030? Or the undergraduate essay title, account for the recovery of the Conservative Party from the electoral annihilation of 2024, or detail the disappearance or detail the decline of the Conservative Party from 2024 to 2030. I think it could go either way. Or you could have a sort of middle ground bubbling along where they remain dysfunctional and essentially hand power to a Labour Party regardless, essentially, of how the Labour Party performs. I don't know, obviously, the answers to any of these questions, but those seem to me to be the three possibilities. And I've read two newspaper columns recently which rather focused the mind on this question. The first by Theresa May, which urged her fellow Conservatives to focus upon the votes lost to the Liberal Democrats, to focus upon the voters who may be choosing between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, the voters who, for whatever reason, can't vote for the Labour Party in its current form, but who are perhaps traditionally Conservative voters who've had enough. And I think that's the big story of the last election in terms of parliamentary seats. The big story is the constituencies which can go one of two ways and went Lib Dem. So in terms of electoral arithmetic at the moment, the Conservatives should be going after the Liberal Democrats, going after Liberal Democrat voters. In terms of parliamentary arithmetic, obviously in terms of electoral arithmetic, the case for going after Reform voters is probably clearer. And there is an article in the Daily Mail today urging them not just to do that, but to undertake some form of pact with Reform, with Nigel Farage's outfit. I mean, listen, it's a little bit mad-eyed moody, the article, for fans of the Harry Potter books or films, but the two poles couldn't be more clearly plotted, could they? On the one hand, you have Theresa May saying go for the Liberal Democrats, and on the other you have Stephen Glover in the Mail saying only a Tory pact with Reform can stop Labour from ruining the country. Not quite unhinged headline territory, but as I say, a little bit mad-eyed moody. And I don't know. And obviously you don't know either, but I want you to think about what you would do. I want you to think about what you would do if you were charged with the job of restoring the Conservative Party as an electoral force. Because I don't think it was an unexpected or unpredictable coincidence yesterday that James cleverly emerged from the Conservative Party conference bedecked in laurels. I thought Natasha Clark did a great job of conveying how he had essentially got the gold medal. He'd come away head and shoulders above his rivals after addressing conference. There was a reminder of the conference to which David Davis went as hot favourite to become the next leader of the Conservative Party after Michael Howard. I told you I'd done an A-level in this stuff, albeit that this happened long after I got my results. And it was David Cameron's speech to conference that galvanised his leadership campaign and was fairly quickly translated into victory, because you get about a month from now. So next week, the Conservative members of Parliament will whittle 4 down to 2. And then the choice between the final 2 will go to the Conservative Party members, who, again, Natasha explained to us yesterday, were very warm, she found, in their attitudes to James Cleverly. And that is where we are, really, in that the speeches given yesterday were quite different. I think it's interesting. They're not the power that they once were, obviously. It appears that most senior Conservatives spend more time worrying about what happens on this programme than they do worrying about what happens in the Daily Mail. More on that later. But the sort of roundup of columnists have gone like this. Badenoch, cleverly, Badenoch. So bad news for Badenoch, and really bad news for Jenrick, that not a single Daily Mail commentator has opted for Robert Jenrick, whose speech was frankly weird and who probably best encapsulates the notion of the Conservatives needing to move to the right. So that's the fundamental question. Should they move to the right or should they move to the middle? And I want you to tell me, A, what you think, obviously what your answer is to that question, a sort of form of what would you do if you were charged with restoring their electoral fortunes, or rather, and why? I don't know, you know. I don't know whether it will be an A-level question in 2030 to detail the recovery or to detail the decline, the continuing decline. The phrases existential threat are bandied around, and yet if you were in Birmingham this week, you would have been struck by the cheerfulness of the place. I think that's partly down to the echo chamber. As a phone-in host, and also as someone who can watch the switchboard and the inbox of other phone-ins, the desperate attempts to inflate Keir Starmer's wardrobe to scandalous proportions. Back on the front page of the Mail today, absolute outrage, front page news when he accepts gifts, absolute outrage, front page news when he gives them back. Unfortunately, no one seems to be capable of pausing for long enough to realise how ridiculous that is. But if you're a Conservative MP and you pay attention chiefly to supportive or right-wing newspapers, you could be forgiven for thinking that that there is cause for celebration at the moment, that the little local difficulty with regard to donations is of some epic significance or possibly is going to remain electorally relevant 5 years from now. That's how mad they are. That's how sort of gaslit they have become, how high they have got on their own supply by having a sort of unquestioning sycophantic support from most of the right-wing media certainly since 2016 and arguably since 2010. So they don't really know which way to go, which is why the two completely contrasting plans can seem equally plausible. Do we get into bed with Nigel Farage, or not get into bed with him, but try to outflank him on the nativist snarling, you know, on the kind of unevidenced rhetoric about foreigners and of course also foreigners? Or do we try to restore a kind of Dominic Grieve, David Gauke style of conservatism with a side order of Rory Stewart and essentially try and turn it into a battle of the sensibles so that the next electoral choice is really between two different flavours of centrism, one of which prioritises the wealthy over the less wealthy, and the other of which seeks a slightly more equitable redistribution of wealth, but between whom there is not an immense amount of clear blue water. And we're back to that phrase. I think it was Gary Gibbon at Channel 4 News who came up with it first. Was it the Loveless landslide? I've been trying to work out its provenance for a while. I gave John Sopel the credit for this wonderful juxtaposition of words. We love an alliteration on this programme. Loveless landslide. It's a beautiful way of describing where Labour are. But what you have in the opposition corner, what you have on the opposition benches, is currently completely up for grabs. So, despite Robert Jenrick's extraordinarily ill-mannered reference to me yesterday on the conference stage, this programme remains a space where traditional Conservatives are very, very welcome, where the importance of discussion to democracy, as Margaret Thatcher understood better than perhaps anybody on the Conservative benches at the moment, the role of journalism is to reflect public opinion, and in some cases, if you're on the opinion side of business, to inform it. So if you are a Conservative, a traditional Conservative, you sit ideologically or even behaviourally, if you sit with Dominic Grieve and David Gauke, if you fondly remember the days of Rory Stewart and Ken Clarke or Nicholas Soames, all of the Tories that were culled by Dominic Cummings's mad ambition, Philip Hammond would be in the front. I mean, it's not that long ago that the Conservative Party contained a significant swathe of sensibles. You don't realise it at the time. We're all guilty of footballification sometimes. You see yourself as leaning to the left. You see the people who lean to the right as your enemy. But goodness me, were I someone who leaned slightly to the right, I'd be looking back upon that pre-2019 election generation of Conservatives with a mixture of incredulity and dewy eyes. Why can't we go back to the days when they didn't all seem mad? And I do mean all of them. Even James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat, who are supposed to be the moderates in this, have had to sort of compete with each other for bonkers points in pursuit of what they think the members want. So, what do you think they should do? 0345 6060 973. Either as a Conservative or not, but I don't want, at early doors, I don't want to include the vision that would be best for people who don't like the Conservatives. So, I love that joke that the Twitter account of the Downing Street Cat made about how if Kemi Badenoch wins, then every Labour MP should have to declare it as a gift. I understand that thinking, but I don't want your answer to the question of what you think the Tories should do to be informed by wanting them to enter oblivion, by wanting them to be diminished, by wanting them to be destroyed. I want you to answer the question constructively, from the point of view that everybody wants a decent opposition. The democracy demands a functional opposition. The Conservative Party in its current form is arguably dysfunctional. Okay? So, what would you do? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Should we do an early Idiots Corner? Yeah? Okay, so here is Rick, no K. Cool. He writes, "Good God, you are an out-of-touch moron. Rory Stewart, emoji. The Tories were wiped out because they were no longer Conservative. Mass immigration and highest tax burden in recent history. You think traditional Tories want more of the same?" I think we're asking a question about how they're going to beat Labour. And Labour won. I can't believe nobody told you that. Seriously. So in the context of who is currently governing and who the Conservatives will be running against 5 years from now, how do they become a more potent and viable electoral force with a side order of who is going to be in charge? Because I don't think you care particularly about this choice, this sort of Hobson's choice between Tugendhat, Badenoch, Cleverly and Jenrick. So what does recovery look like? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10 is the time. This is a remarkable observation, actually, that the standing ovation, the biggest cheer of the day in Birmingham, as Arnab reminds us, came when James cleverly urged the audience to be normal. Called for the party to be normal again. We need to be normal, which I think is probably a dig at Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. But what does recovery look like for the Conservative Party? Here are the numbers now. You will get through. 10:21 is the time. And I think it's important to remember, as Helen in Staines puts it, we need a good Tory leader. Well, I don't know if you're going to get that anytime soon, but we need a good Tory party, certainly a functional Tory party for the sake of democratic discourse, not just a bad one to ensure that they stay out of power. It's remarkable how quickly the world turns, isn't it? So, I mean, in the days immediately after the election, whenever I heard somebody say, oh, you need a good opposition in order to ensure that democracy can function, I did confess to you at the time. I think I'll get lost. I get lost. You've had 14 years. I don't care about the challenges you're going to put up to the new government. But, you know, 3 months later, 4 months later, I'm already thinking, yeah, of course we need a proper opposition. Not least because you want opposition to the Labour Party to be meaningful and substantive, not nonsense about suits and football tickets. So what does recovery look like? Wayne's in Kingsbridge. Wayne, what do you reckon?
I think we need the Conservatives to shift back to centre. So caveat that with I'm a Labour Party member, have been for 14 plus years.
Okay.
And yeah, I voted for Andy MacDonald when Jeremy Corbyn became leader, voted for Keir Starmer, and so that's the history. But I really want to see the Conservatives be in a place where they feel like they can combat Labour from a centre point of view, because my fear is that with 4 million people voting for reform in the last election, they need to have that broad church. Labour has always been a broad church, and the Conservatives have traditionally been... But
they're waving goodbye forever to the 4 million people that voted reform under your...
Potentially.
Yeah, okay.
Potentially.
And our electoral system makes that pragmatic, possibly. But of course, if that 4 million... and all the constituencies where reform came second to Labour are kind of off the table for the Tories if this happens.
That depends on Labour's performance.
Yes,
so if Labour perform the way that I want them to perform, which is really well, and in 5 years' time stand a chance of winning yet again and keeping the same sort of number of seats, I wouldn't be opposed to them losing some. If it meant that they went to the Conservatives, who had moved back to the centre and were arguing there's a slightly different way of making this decision, rather than it being, no, we're going to completely shut the borders, completely change the way that we do this is a complete polar opposite. And I think that most people in their life in 5 years' time will see the way that Labour have performed, as they should do, like you said, as history, and the 5 years that they will have to do whatever changes they wish to be made.
So what will a challenge look like if Labour have a record of competence, relative competence, in place in 2029? What would an alternative? What would a vote for change look like?
Well, for one, you'd have to have continued competence. You wouldn't want someone to come in and be incompetent. If we had that for certainly for the last 5 to 6 years, we've had incompetence at the heart of Whitehall, but these things will hopefully improve. But you don't want to then turn around and go, yeah, okay, I'll vote for the guy that's likely to go and have a party instead of actually making decent decisions.
It's all to play for, because and this is why I hope today's conversation actually is 50-50 or at least 52-48, because I can see the wisdom in everything you say, but I can also see the wisdom in the lurch to the right, because they're so fearful of that 4 million figure and they're so fearful of the threat posed to them electorally by the reform outfit. The idea that we need to, and I don't know, how do we work out how many of those 4 million are, quotes, traditional Tory voters, end quotes? Because the Tory party was not a place relatively recently that felt as if it was sort of going after EDL characters, going after EDL type voters. So how many of the reform voters are traditional Conservative voters, or how many were kind of disenfranchised before Farage's various iterations and vanity projects came
I wonder
pass?
I wonder if a portion of that is just people who voted for the first time in a while because they feel like they finally got something different to vote for.
Yeah. Or the Red Wall, remember? I think, the 30p Lee faction of people who thought that they were traditionally Labour but have had their brains boiled by immigration rhetoric in recent years and now think that they're very, very right-wing.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference as well. And I think once you feel in communities that feel like they've not been served because they weren't served, because everything from, funnily enough, we were having a conversation at work about anxiety in young people and how, the difference that youth clubs make to young people being able to mix with people outside of their family home. I think that if these sorts of environments change over the next 5 years for the better, where they feel like government actually means something and supports family rather than it being, no, well, I don't get anything, so why should anybody else?
But it's worse than that because of austerity. So this is the Tories. Oh, gosh, there you go. You've led me right to the water on this one. So can the Tories turn around and say the reason why you feel dispossessed, the reason why you feel ignored, the reason why you feel let down is largely because of the austerity that we presided over for 14 years? Or are they bound, really, by electoral requirements to actually pretend that it's all because of immigration?
I don't think that a party is ever bound by its past. It can change. Labour changed in office between 1997 and 2010.
It's changed beyond recognition between 2019 and 2024 as well. But
absolutely.
Not its past in power, but its past in opposition. But in some ways, that's the question, isn't it? If you see reform as a single issue outfit obsessed with immigration in general and foreigners, then what does the Tory party do? Does it admit that the reason why the country is not operating as well as it might have done is because of the policies that we pursued for 14 years, or do we take a leaf out of Farage's nicotine-stained notebook and pretend that it's all about foreigners? I mean, and that, if you really just prioritised winning over everything else, if you prioritised it over the truth or over decency or honour or integrity, which is kind of where the Conservative Party is at the moment, does it go further down the road of dishonesty and nativist snarling because it's effective? People believe it. Donald Trump talking about Haitians, you can sit there and laugh and you know they're not eating dogs and cats, but you know that the people wearing their Donald Trump hats somewhere believe that he's telling them the truth. They want to. So I don't know. You'd like to think that Britain was a little bit more civilised than that, a little bit more educated. But of course, you don't know for sure that it is. Wayne, thank you. 0345 60973 if you want to contribute to this. I think that's it. I think that is absolutely at the heart of it, that notion of whether or not they continue to blame everything on immigration, which the Labour Party is not doing, albeit that it hasn't been as warm or as forward-looking as some Labour supporters would hope on that issue. Do they continue to blame everything on immigration, which they know isn't true, they know to be a lie? But, I mean, if Donald Trump wins in November, how are you going to talk them out of the idea that just lying about immigration is the easiest way to grease your passage to power? It's coming up to 10:30. Phil in Hull will be up next after the news. After Phil, it could be you. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. So, come 2030, you're sitting in your A-level exam hall, you open your paper, what do we think the question is going to be? Explain, because my A-level was about why did the SDP disappear? It was, I literally got down, got into the exam hall, sat down, opened up, well actually, have I ever told you the story of my politics A-level? The story of how I ended up submitting a paper that I wasn't actually entered for. Because on the train to school that morning, I know you think I went to boarding school, but I'd been expelled by now. So on the train to school that morning, I read an article about the decline of the SDP because they disbanded that morning or merged with the Liberal Party, I forget which. But they were over as a distinct electoral force. So I read a 2-page article about it, got into the exam hall, and there was a question. The only problem was I wasn't entered for that paper. It's 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33, a few of your texts. Like a racehorse with a broken leg, writes Simon rather poetically. The only humane option is to put the Tory party out to pasture. Donald suggests that if the Tories wanted power, the best thing to do would be to get the likes of Dominic Grieve back. Decent Tories do exist. And this anonymous texter is taking things rather less seriously this morning and writes, please tell me that Peter Andre sang Mysterious Girl to Liz Truss. Peter Andre, the star attraction at the Conservative Party Congress in Birmingham on the showbiz side of things, which I presume is a consequence of Jim Davidson having defected to Reform. But anyway, any port in a storm. And speaking of the Conservatives, what does recovery look like? Which way do you think they should go? Or indeed, which way will they go? Because Theresa May is calling for the territory inhabited by the Liberal Democrats to become their target, whereas some commentators and indeed some Conservatives, Robert Jenrick probably would be included in this category, think that they should be trying to eat Nigel Farage's lunch. Phil's in Hull. Phil, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. Good
Hello,
to speak to you again.
Likewise.
Deputy PM, yeah?
Oh, that's so, God, that was a while ago, wasn't it? Right, yeah, exactly. Okay, the bar is high. The bar is high, Philip.
Well, and Gary Lineker obviously is the Foreign Secretary. That's not happened now, has it? So anyway, we'll get by. So when I spoke to you during a few times, but obviously during the Brexit, and what I said about the Tory party at the time was Europe was the biggest issue in the Tory party.
Yeah.
And what's happened, the current iteration of this Tory party now has meant, obviously, the whole Brexit thing has meant cult of
God, you've done it again. You've done it again. I mean, it is as if the stuffing has been removed from the toy, isn't it? They've been so obsessed with Europe for so long. Every administration defined by it, up to and including Boris Johnson's.
Exactly.
So there's an element of not knowing what to do with themselves now that sort of 100%. Beast is dead for a generation or two.
Exactly that. And what I also said was, obviously, it's a virus. It was a virus which obviously was inflicted then on the rest of the country, because, before that, yes, we've seen the headlines in the press, the anti-Europe things, but I think generally people were just getting on with it. But it was becoming a bigger issue in the Tory party, which was leading them to the right, because obviously Nigel Farage's party, whether it was UKIP, whether it was the Brexit party or the current iteration now as Reform, that was who they were trying to pander to. Of course. So now what we're seeing is obviously after the disaster that Brexit is, obviously, but the fact that we're out of Europe now.
It's a dead rubber. I mean, there's no debate about a disaster. No Tory leader is going to stand up and pursue power on a ticket promising to go back into the European Union. So not for a while anyway, although it's probably inevitable. So what do they do? And they don't know, do they? So Farage has gone full, he got his Brexit win. He promised he'd leave the country if it was a failure. He's called it a failure and he's still here. So he will just continue to be economical with the actuality and demonise foreigners. And that is the new threat to the Tories. And you can see it playing out in the same way. Jenrick is on board with that. There's a piece in the Times today suggesting that that's what he's doing. He's becoming a Nigel Farage tribute act. Cleverly is perceived very much as going in the opposite direction, as is Tom Tugendhat. But it's the same sort of battle over the soul of the party. Do we become nativist snarlers, or do we try to be a bit more honest and sensible?
I think, unfortunately, where we are at this moment in time, which is obviously what we're talking about now, is they can't go to the centre because they don't have the the people within it, even within the Tory membership, as we've seen with who have been electing as the leaders. They don't want that. They are more towards the more extreme right of the Tory party wing.
The electorate, and they chucked out, and in terms of personnel, they chucked out all the people who might be able to deliver what you're describing in 2019.
So I think, unfortunately, and I say this, with a heavy heart, but unfortunately, I think if the Tories are going to have any success, it's not going to be in the centre because they don't believe in that. That's not their ideology right now. Right. And I think the success is going to be where unfortunately bringing that the right wing where Nigel Farage is bringing that into the mainstream, which we've seen, for example, across Europe, where we've seen the success of particular right-wing parties, unfortunately, as we see in America potentially with Donald Trump potentially getting into power. That, bringing that into the mainstream is a scary thought, and it's something which the Tories have been moving into further and further, and we can see it in the language and the way that they've been, the culture wars and everything that's been going on.
It's the racist liars. If you can't beat them, join them. Yeah,
100%. And unfortunately, people. As we know, you speak to so many people, but as we know, people just don't use logic, unfortunately, and they'll want to scapegoat as many. That's why immigration always works, regardless of its truths,
as a topic, as a wedge issue. Because Haitians, people want to believe that Haitians eat dogs and cats, and people want to believe that people who look a bit different from them are not to be trusted. It's somehow a comforting bigotry. Was it inevitable then? I mean, because what you've described rather brilliantly is the relatively swift transformation of anti-EU sentiment into anti-foreigner, sentiment or anti-immigrant sentiment. And obviously Brexit was built largely on anti-immigrant sentiment. A lot of that was dressed up as anti-EU sentiment. It's why people ended up getting into so much intellectual trouble when they were trying to give actual substantive reasons for leaving and didn't want to say out loud, I don't like foreigners, there's too many Polish people or there's too many Germans. Was it inevitable that the pro-Brexit sentiment would almost sort of drop its trousers and reveal that it was anti-immigrant all along? And that's where the Tory party is now. Or could it have gone differently? Could it have gone any differently?
I think it would have gone differently if that call hadn't happened within the party. Yeah. So as soon as, the Ken Clarks of this world and, all those were called from the party, I think that was the start of the demise, but that was a problem, right? Because there was always that internal battle of those who were, a bit more rational and logical and sensible, I like to say, versus those who were, the rabid rights people saying, we don't want Europe to be, we don't want,
Because that's not a Venn diagram. That's not a Venn diagram. That's a circle. The people who are rabidly anti-immigrant were the same people who were rabidly anti-EU.
Exactly that. And so that's why I'm saying the current iteration of this party right now, the current vehicle that's operating, is not the same Tory party as we know it. And so because of that, I can't see how they can move back into a place where the Lib Dems are sitting and where Labour's sitting.
Because the vehicle that they're driving is not the vehicle that we would have been talking about even 6 years ago.
Exactly, it's changed.
So, God, you're good at this, aren't you? It's a good job you don't ring me every day, Phil. People would be agitating for you to take over.
I'll still keep you as PM. I'll still be
that's very well. I don't know about that. I feel like a lame duck. Top man, thanks for that. And what he's done is what I failed to do in my introduction, which is track the difference, distinguish between what would be the path to power if you prioritised pragmatism over principle, as opposed to what we might want the Conservative Party to look like, or what might represent a restoration of previous standards. But you can't restore previous standards if none of the people who upheld them are in the building anymore. I'm saying it as if that's a matter of fact. It's a matter of opinion, but it's an opinion with which at the moment I completely concur. Phil, thank you. James is in Chippenham. James, what would you like to say?
Well, you're saying about you'd like the people back that were culled from the party. In my opinion, and from what I've seen, there needs to be a lot more of a cull, to be perfectly honest, and get rid of some of the more liberal aspects in the party that are causing trouble. Okay,
like who or what?
Well, I'm obviously not going to mention names.
Why not?
But there's plenty. But it wouldn't be right there because I'm on about in the local Conservative Association. Not so much as
what, in Chippenham?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's plenty of people in there.
No, well, that would be a bit pointless, mentioning the names of people in the Chippenham Local Conservative Association. But what do we mean when we talk about liberal tendencies? What is the rot that you're identifying when you use that word?
Well, I think it stems back to when David Cameron was leader. He was picking candidates for the election and basically dictating to local constituencies, you will have this candidate. If you don't, I will impose an all-female shortlist on you. On your constituency, and basically picking candidates that just were standing just for the fact that they wanted to be an MP.
That's the main reason. That is the main reason for standing, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can't really pick someone who was going to pick to be a candidate for the Labour Party and then decides to be a candidate for the Conservative Party.
So you've got a big problem with Lee Anderson then, presumably.
Out of all of the people in the Conservative Party at the moment, he's the one that only talks Conservative.
But he's not in the Conservative Party at the moment.
Well,
and he used to be in the Labour Party. I don't know why. I just had an inkling you might like him, and yet he moved from the Labour Party to the Conservative Party to reform. So he's the living embodiment of everything that you've rung in to condemn.
Well, I think he would be. I don't think he's not leadership material. That's to be That's perfectly honest.
Well, that's a bit unfair on the fella. But anyway, let's park that for a moment and go back to this notion of liberty. You're not saying there's too many women in the Conservative Party, are you? Or are you? I mean, possibly you are.
No, definitely not. Because one of the most successful prime ministers we've ever had in this country was a female, and she was a Conservative.
That's right, Theresa May. That was a joke. No, that was a joke. So I don't know that David Cameron did introduce all women shortlists. If he did, it was only everyone.
No, he threatened to and had numerous.
Well, no, he said he was open to the idea of it, but insisted that it would always be voluntary. It's an odd. I mean, I think for people listening, it's an odd thing to pick if we're trying to work out how the Tory party.
No, I wasn't saying as in the problem is having all female shortlists. I was saying that you've got him acting like a dictator.
But he didn't. He didn't. He said it would. I mean, he said in the event of it happening, it would be voluntary. So, in terms of the path back, I mean, the parliamentary party, not the Chippenham constituency party. Who should they be getting rid of, or what do you want to see less of, or more of?
More conservatives and less woke would be good for a start.
What does that mean?
Well, you've just got people who are not. They don't have traditional conservative values.
Like what? Like what?
Go back to David Cameron, the gay marriage. That was, in my opinion, was designed as a wind up membership, as it affected so many people.
I think David Cameron, in conjunction with the Liberal Democrats, of course, brought in equal marriage to wind up members of his own party.
He just liked to appeal to the Guardian newspaper and the BBC by bashing members of his own party constantly.
How is letting gay people get married bashing members of his own party? You know, there are gay people in the Conservative. I have a gay colleague who is married.
Yes, but
a gay Conservative colleague who is married tried to get into Parliament at the last election, but the less we say about that, the better.
I think he just was doing things to trying to appeal to the Guardian newspaper and the BBC.
Right.
And
so equal marriage was not. Equal marriage wasn't designed to appeal to gay people who wanted to get married. It was designed to appeal to the Guardian newspaper and the BBC. Okay, that's a thought. Can I ask you a trick question?
Go on then.
When did you last read The Guardian?
Never.
And yet here you are. Should we try one more thing that they could do in order what would we do? Repeal equal marriage? Tell the gays they can't get married anymore because it was all a big wind up.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong in bringing it in, but I do think the majority of the reason he brought it in.
Yeah. So in terms of how they can restore their fortunes.
With everything going on in the country, there was far more things.
I know, but it's 2024 now, and we're looking at the road ahead. You sound a little bit obsessed with equal marriage, but maybe that's not fair. Let's end with this then. Let's end with your definition.
The point I'm getting at is
yes,
you can't distinguish anything between any of them anymore. There's no you can't distinguish between Tony Blair, David Cameron, Theresa May. They're all the same.
Yeah, they're just not, though, are they? I mean, on all sorts of things, all sorts of issues where there are huge differences.
That's probably why the Conservatives are losing votes. And at the last election, let's be honest, Labour did not get any more votes than they got. They got less votes than they did under Jeremy Corbyn. So there was not a massive vote.
No, it's a loveless landslide. But I'm not hearing much about what the Conservatives could do differently, apart from women and gays.
No.
What else have you said?
Again,
what else have you said in this? What else have you said in the course of this call? What else have you talked about apart from women and gays?
Well, it's not conservative. It's not the Conservative Party is not conservative anymore.
Okay, and we'll end on this. When you use the word woke, what do you mean by that?
I think you know what it is already.
I've no idea. What do you mean? I've no idea. I've asked a million different people. I've never got a clear answer on it. What do you mean when you use that word?
Being anti-British.
How can it be anti-British? How can woke mean anti-British?
You just need to look at the sort of what's going on in schools nowadays.
What's that then?
Well, you know what it is, James.
I honestly don't. I know that when some people in public life shout woke, a lot of people shout how high. But what do you mean?
It's like on the other issue. You say that.
No, let's not change the subject. What's happening in schools that is woke?
You do this all the time, Dave.
I know, it's so annoying. I ask people to define the words that they use on the radio. So what do you mean by woke? What do you mean?
Snarling at foreigners.
What do you mean by woke?
You snarled at foreigners, James.
What do you mean by woke?
What do I mean by woke?
Yes.
It's ultra-liberal nonsense.
For example?
Men can be women, women can be men.
Yes.
Telling people they can have 46 different genders. What's that all about?
So that's it then. It's the transgender conversation.
Well, I didn't say transgender.
So we've got the gays, we've got the women, and we've got the trans. You've done the hat trick, James.
Well,
it's 10:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:52. Just a quick word about the last caller, James in Chippenham. There is a tendency among people who are in a similar place to him politically to come in very critically after people like that ring in and arguably embarrass themselves a bit on the radio. But at least he's got the guts to ring in. The kind of people who listen to a call like that and go, "Oh my God, that's me," are the kind of people that then sort of say, "Oh, James O'Brien cherry picks calls, or he uses actors, or some of the stuff that they come up with is absolutely extraordinary." But that's what happened. That's what would happen to you if you had the guts to ring in. Because that's what I do. I will ask you to define the words that you use and explain the opinions that you hold. And it's not particularly powerful. It's just still a little bit rare. 10:53 is the time. Scott Lucas is a professor of American politics at University College Dublin and joins me now to discuss developments overnight with regard to Donald Trump's legal situation. I suppose we should get a quick thumbnail sketch from you of what has happened, Scott, and how important it is / might be.
So the context, James, is that earlier this year, the Supreme Court gave Trump partial immunity in his trials, his multiple trials, including the potential trial over his attempt to overturn the 2020 election, culminating in the Capitol attack in January 2021. So the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, and his team went back and they redefined the indictment so that the indictment at no point is based on Trump's official acts, his duties as president.
Yeah.
That meant they stripped out, for example, his instructions to the Justice Department to try to overturn the election. What they came back with is 165 pages in a filing for Judge Chutkan, which sets out Trump's acts, which they say are as a private individual or his political acts. And this covers months, all the way from the election up to the Capitol attack. And to give you one takeaway of how serious this is, during the Capitol attack, as the people who have been at the Trump rally or support Trump are charging through the building, threatening to execute lawmakers, indeed threatening to execute Vice President Mike Pence, Trump is tweeting about it, right? He's tweeting in ways that simply said to approve of what is happening.
Yeah.
And he's watching TV. An aide comes up to him and says, "Look, the vice president is in danger, Mike Pence." And Trump, who hated the fact that Mike Pence would not intervene to block Joe Biden's confirmation hearing, turns around and says, "So what?" according to this filing. There are many examples I can give you if we could sit down and chat about it. Just to be very blunt about it, Trump is told on numerous occasions by his lawyers, by Republican National Committee officials, by state officials, that the election is legitimate, and he shuts them down. And he eventually says, "Doesn't matter whether I won or lost the election, we have to fight like hell."
And I mean, fight like hell, I suppose you could offer up a defensive rhetoric, couldn't you, rather than actual instruction. So what, in the context of Mike Pence facing lethal threat, is, as you say, I mean, that's pretty hefty, even by the standards of Donald Trump's track record, and also an apparent exhortation or encouragement of actual rioting. Was that the January the 6th riots, where he said, riot, do it, or was that somewhere else? Was that something else?
Okay, so what happens is in the run-up to the January 6th riot, there's a man named Mike Roman, who is he's the director basically of the electoral side of the campaign, and he's watching all the votes come in, and he's being told by others, "Look, no, these are legitimate counts. You know, it looks like we've lost." And he goes back to them and says, challenge these results.
Right.
Don't let them stand. And then he says 3 words, according to the indictment: make them riot.
Make them riot. Wow. Wow. I ask academics and journalists this question, and so I'll ask you, because, we have been here before, haven't we? Kind of, where we are surveying behaviour that we never thought would be possible in the land of the free. Allegations or established facts linked to a president that are beyond comprehension, beyond belief. And it happens so often, you get kind of gaslit or the frog gets boiled. It becomes hard then to essentially measure how big a deal something is. He's an adjudicated sex offender. He's a multiple felon. He's convicted on several counts. He's facing more and more legal. So where does this sit on the scale of Donald Trump's malfeasance or alleged malfeasance?
Look, I'll say first of all, James, that I think it's the responsibility of all of us, not just an academic or a journalist. Responsibility of all of us if we want to have a functioning democracy.
Absolutely.
To get to the facts and to get away from the spectacle of all this.
Yes.
And what the facts effectively constitute, and I say this knowing what these words mean, is that Donald Trump tried to pursue a coup attempt on January the 6th, 2021. He tried, through his lawyers, through activists around him like Steve Bannon, his former chief strategist, through his lawyer Rudy Giuliani, he tried not only to overturn the election, but to block the congressional certification of Joe Biden as president. If he had been able to succeed that, it would have been an unprecedented stomping on the American Constitution, stomping on American democracy, and a breaking of the American system. In other words, what we would call in any other country a coup attempt.
It's extraordinary. And there is, of course, every chance that he will be back in the White House next year, which rather suggests that people in various walks of life haven't properly absorbed the scale of what you've just described, or don't care enough.
Well, again, it's a toss-up election. Let's make sure we put it out there. And what you have is that in America, the country that I'm still very close to after being away from it for 40 years, is that you have this tension in the 21st century of social media between spectacle, which has always been the spectacle of America, the conventions, the flamboyant speeches, the rallies, and the reality of day-to-day, making the system work. And a lot of people, whether out of anger or frustration or because they get led by Trump, who effectively is a snake oil salesman, that's what he does, and he does it well, they bid themselves in with him. This is why this is the most important election in 1865. It's important because of women's rights. It's important because of the economy or immigration or foreign policy. It is important, however, because it will determine whether the American system rises or falls.
Wow. Professor Scott Lucas, Professor of American Politics at University College Dublin. Crikey, that's pretty heavy stuff. And again, you're in that weird situation of knowing that it's true, but hearing it laid out by someone with those kind of credentials is still quite an arresting moment. And of course, the mystery, which we touched on right at the beginning of this hour, of how Trump continues to garner support when his mission, his project is so obviously dangerous, is unravelable. And I need to remind you as well, not just sort of people like Farage that are still shilling for Trump on this side of the Atlantic, but Robert Jenrick until very recently was saying that he wanted Donald Trump to win the election in America, although I think he might have backed down slightly from that position subsequently. It's just gone 11 o'clock.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 4 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If I was long-term sick, I don't know what I would make of the news coverage of me. I really don't. I work on the presumption that most people who have been unable to work for a significant length of time are not very happy about that element of their situation. I think that the inability to work, incapacitation, it must be very sapping, must be very draining. And then, of course, the portrayal of everybody in that situation as being dishonest, deceitful, or just plain lazy adds to your burden. So I always wonder about the criticism of people that you wouldn't want to swap places with. It's quite funny. The people who are less comfortable than you, and the idea that they are the reasons for your dissatisfaction. It's a bit of a broad brushstroke, that, but it's not dissimilar to some of the conversations we had in the last hour about immigration, is it? The people who are less comfortable than you. It's one of the great triumphs of right-wing rhetoric over the ages, isn't it? To encourage us to hate people who've got less than us. Because if we hate people who've got less than us, then we haven't got the time or the energy left to go after the people who've got lots more than us. Or indeed to ask the question of quite why they've got so much more than us. I sometimes misrepresent this, but I love that old cartoon or that old image of Rupert Murdoch sitting at a table with an ordinary British worker and a recently arrived migrant, and there are 10 biscuits on the middle of the table, on the plate on the middle of the table. Rupert Murdoch takes them all, puts them all in his pocket, and then turns to the worker and says, that immigrant's just nicked your biscuit. I tell you, I slightly misremember that. I never get the detail exactly correct, but the point stands, doesn't it? That, oh, by the way, that long-term sick person over there has just nicked your biscuit. I take your dissatisfaction, I take your unhappiness, and I direct it at a target. And it seemed to me, particularly when Mel Stride was Work and Pension Secretary, it seemed to me that they were very, very deliberately trying to direct dissatisfaction and unhappiness and, well, anger really at people who were long-term sick. So I don't know how I would feel about this if it was me that was being talked about when I see a headline like the one today: sickness crisis drives 8 million from workforce. Shock report reveals 1 in 5 with conditions that either leave them jobless or limit what they can do. Depression and anxiety are big issues here. People with work-limiting health conditions is the sort of technical way of describing it. And the ease with which some people can be encouraged to approach this issue with derision in their minds is often quite heartbreaking to me. I don't know how much experience you've got of either depression or anxiety personally, or depression or anxiety in somebody else. But the idea that it's just sort of feeling a little bit blue and all you need to do is pull your socks up, give yourself a pep talk and then get out there is just so far from the truth that it's extraordinary. Well, it's not extraordinary because it's no coincidence. It's still in public discourse. How long ago is it? I don't know who I'm talking to now, by the way. I'm certainly not talking to the colleagues I've got at the moment. But how long ago is it that we first did the difference between depression and being sad, between depression as a clinical condition, a medical condition, and being sad? Because, I mean, until relatively recently, almost every phone-in I ever heard or every newspaper column I ever read about depression was essentially dedicated to people who were a bit sad, as if they were being signed off work because their football team lost on Saturday, or as if they were just going through a brief period of emotional doldrum. They're just being dumped, so they've been signed off work. Depression is crushing, absolutely crushing. And anxiety is every bit as bad. Anxiety is an irrational terror sometimes of things. Leaving the house, it's the idea. And listen, I'm not immune to the idea that people could just get over that hump if ... Now, I don't think people could just get over that hump, could just get over that threshold if we shouted at them more, we frightened them more, we demonised them more. I mean, that might work in a way, but it would store up an even bigger problem for the future. That way breakdowns lie. That way self-harm lies. That way the worst of all possible things that one can do to oneself lies. That forcing people to ignore or overcome their own emotional reality, their own feelings, their own chemical reality when it comes to brain chemistry is possible. You can do it. You can whip people metaphorically and physically. You can grab them by the ears and pull them to their feet and push them into battle, they shot people in the First World War whose mental collapse was so complete that they couldn't pick up a rifle and go back to the front. They shot them for desertion. So, and that didn't work either, of course. The threat of being shot was not enough to persuade these men to go back to the front. The reality of facing a firing squad was not enough to persuade these men to go back to the front because their illness was so profound, their sickness was so profound. And yet I am not immune. I am not immune to the idea that something can help people get over that hump. In fact, I think you have to believe it, don't you? Because otherwise, you are consigned to the scrap heap forever. I use that word cautiously. I'm using the word I would use if these stories were about me. If my sickness was keeping me from working and I was reading stories about 8 million fellow sufferers unable to work because of illness, I don't think that suggesting it's possible to help people, many of these people, not all, but many of these people back to work is necessarily negative, necessarily dangerous. That's why I refer back to the way Mel Stride talked about it, as if it was just a case of pulling your socks up and, pasting a smile on your face, ignoring your feelings and marching out, and by morning break you'd be feeling fine again. But if you talk about it in a different way, if you talk about it in a constructive way, then it would be a good thing. And that's why I began by saying I don't know how I'd feel if this was me. Because here's the other headline in the news today: job advisors to help boost mental health, right? Employment advisors will be stationed in NHS hospitals under plans to make finding a job a central part of mental health treatment. Now, that's journalism. That first paragraph is how a journalist has chosen to present a policy. And that, I think, if I were poorly, that would frighten me a bit. Because that would make me think that they're going to force me out of the door. They're going to push me to the point where I can get out of the door, but I'm going to collapse later in the day, later in the week, later in the month, mentally or physically. So what would help actually look like? And how helpful is it to talk in these terms? I'm putting myself out there, okay? And I'm going to say, I think this is good. I think that the idea that you are either malingering or completely incapable of work and there is nothing in between is ridiculous. You know, Phil's been in touch already. A percentage, and he uses capital letters, don't want to work. So what? So what? We're not talking about them. We're talking about people who want to work but can't, Phil. I don't know that I could make things any clearer. I'll try and do it in words of one syllable. So the notion, that was a joke, obviously. I'm not going to do it in words of one syllable. That'd be like asking, I don't know, Tyson Fury to it's not going to work, this analogy. The subject matter's too important. So here are the largely mythical constituency of people that Phil's sending me capital lettered texts about. And here at the other end are people who are obviously going to find it incredibly difficult to get into work. And here's everybody else. Here are people who want to but can't. Here are people who need the right sort of help to get into work and aren't getting it. So how do we do this? How do I, if this was me, stop being scared of the language here? It's going to be a central part of mental health treatment to make finding a job. Make finding a job a central part of mental health treatment. If you just wrote that differently, employment advisors will be stationed in NHS hospitals to help mental health patients find work. Do you see what I mean? I'm not going mad, am I? There's two completely different messages that are sent to you there. It's not really a criticism of the journalist concerned, but I rely upon news reports to find my way around the issues that we're going to talk about together. So this is how they've chosen to report it in the Times. Employment advisors will be stationed in NHS hospitals under plans to make finding a job a central part of mental health treatment. Now, if I was writing that story yesterday, I would have written employment advisors will be stationed in NHS hospitals to help people receiving mental health treatment back into work, or to help people receiving mental health treatment into work. And I think there's a big difference there. I think if I am talking about you, then you know that the right kind of help could help you go to work. And the idea that you don't want to work, in capital letters, is as ridiculous as it is offensive. So, what do you think about this? Job advisors to help boost mental health. I like the headline. I don't like the first paragraph. To make finding a job a central part of mental health treatment. So I think the best way to do this is to talk to the lucky people who have had long-term sickness, probably for our purposes today in the areas of depression and mental health, and hear your story of how you got back to work. What helped you? Because the state isn't providing it, really. It would have been down to how lucky you were with your employer, perhaps, or how lucky you were with your circle, how lucky you were with your finances or your family, how lucky you were. And I want to spread that luck around. I want to know what it would look like for more people. So if you've got long-term mental health problems, most obviously depression and anxiety, if you got back to work, can you talk us through what helped? 0345 60 60973. And if you want to get back to work, can you talk us through what you think might help? And while we're here, let's also do that thing. Because just because I've done it before, I've got to train myself out of the idea that because I've done it before means I don't need to do it again. I've got so many listeners these days that we didn't have 10 years ago. You won't have heard this. If you have suffered from depression, could you explain to Mel Stride or A.N. Other, the Daily Mail columnist, or lazy 1980s right-wing phone-in host, could you explain what the difference is between actual depression or clinical anxiety and being a bit sad or a bit worried? So there's three ways into this. Your story of recovery and return to work, your prescription for what you think would help you recover and return to work, and your definitions and distinctions between career-threatening conditions of depression and anxiety and feelings of sadness and fear that we all deal with at some point in our lives, unless, I suppose, you're a sociopath.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 11. Thank you. I did get it wrong, Stevie, in Belfast. I don't know why I get it wrong. It's in one of my books. Some people think I invented it, but I didn't. Here it is. So there's 20 biscuits in a works canteen. Rupert Murdoch comes in, takes 19 of them, puts one down in the middle of the table, taps the worker on the shoulder, points at the immigrant on the other side of the table and says, look, he's taking your biscuit, and then walks off laughing. And that, in a way, informs my politics and my confusion and sadness about the ease with which many people are persuaded to believe that the things that they're unhappy about are caused by the people who've got less than them. And that brings us back to long-term sickness, not immigration today. Alex is in Peckham. Alex, what made you pick up the phone?
Just what you were saying, James. I'm just quickly pulling over because I was parked in the wrong place.
Okay, mate. Take your time.
About what you were saying about what gets you going. It's not simple. It is debilitating having depression, or sometimes having depression, you get the anxiety as well because you're scared of what's coming. But what you said about your circle, where they can help, and it's been a long process. It's been over 10 years since I've gotten from where I was, which was in the darkest place imaginable, after 10 years of doing things I shouldn't have been doing, staying in my house being upside down. When I say upside down, a foot of rubbish all the way through my flat.
Really?
It was really bad. But the first thing I did was ask for help, and that was to my dad.
Gosh.
And he didn't get it because he sees me as this real confident person. No one got it. No one who knows me got it at all until I started speaking about it.
Really? So it was. So you hid it successfully, except when you shut your front door.
Yeah, basically. But it got to the point where I was thinking about doing something silly on more than one occasion. But I had to ask for help. Had to. And
presumably you couldn't work, or at some point work?
No, I did go to my doctors and they put me on antidepressants and tried to get counselling within the system is very, very hard to get counselling.
This is the point, isn't it? So this is where the language is so important, because you speak as someone who clearly knew that there could be light at the end of the tunnel. It disappeared sometimes, right? But you knew somewhere that there must be light at the end of the tunnel, otherwise you wouldn't have gone to your dad. You knew there was a way back, not just into the light, but into the workplace.
No, I don't agree with you there.
Oh,
I actually just,
okay.
it was rock bottom.
Yeah, okay.
It was just rock bottom. It weren't about seeing any kind of like. It was just like, I can't do this no more.
Right.
And you know, the worst thing about thinking about doing something silly to yourself is the other people in your life, and then you hate the other people in your life because you're like, I'm not killing myself because I'm thinking about you.
Oh,
so
wow.
what about me? So it's a big vicious circle.
So your suffering is their fault because the only thing stopping you is the thought of how much it would hurt them.
No, I think it's a lifetime thing. I've always had it, and through counselling over the years, I realised I'm always going to have it. But I now have tools in my toolbox. And, you know, one of the first things you mentioned in Circle was I had a friend who lived in Dubai, and she came and she said, Coops, what do you want? And I'm like, I just want to get moving. What does that consist of? And I ended up going doing voluntary work at my local library.
Oh, wow.
She walked me in there while I was drunk, made me fill out the application form, and that was the start of my journey. And
that is a story of managing your condition and becoming functional again.
I don't feel I was managing. I was just.
No, you are now, though. You stop contradicting everything I say, Alex. For heaven's sake.
No, but because I know me, basically it's one step at a time.
Yeah.
And you know, and through her I got that, and through that voluntary work, I bumped into a lady who was. I told her I was interested in supporting kids. She was like, funnily enough, I work in an SEN school, and I started doing voluntary work there, and then worked there for 2 years now. Wow. Having a mental health condition and working in a school like that was, I can't even describe how difficult it was, but they were very, very supportive. And I had to leave that because I think the school system is messed up in some ways in regards to how much you can deal with the kids in a certain manner.
Okay.
But and I left there, and then, you know, a friend of mine died. And I remember he was 47, he died from a brain tumour.
Right.
And that day I cried my eyes out because I was just like, and a friend of mine said to me, you've got to represent him, his legacy, because some people would love to still be here and they're not. And just to take you back, during that school time, I learnt about Cats 5K. And it was because I wanted to do Race for Life. Yeah. And I used to go every morning because I was a part next to the school and do Cats 5K. But during every holiday with the kids, like, you know, kids have 6 weeks holiday, as soon as I stopped running, I'd be in my house staring at the wall for 6 weeks.
You'd start sliding back again. So all of this, basically, everything you're saying is something that many people would benefit from having help achieving. So when I read employment advisors will be stationed in NHS hospitals under plans to make finding a job a central part of mental health treatment, what you're describing is people helping you make progress to a place where things aren't as bad as they used to be and you can get on with getting on with it. Yeah, but we like you said about the language, you can't make someone do something. No,
they
exactly,
exactly. You've got to have the right language when you're talking to them and finding.
It just needs the word help in it to help finding a job a central part of mental health treatment. Not make. You can't do it.
But what I will say here is I found, and it's something that I prescribe to, and it's something that friends know me about, and they said I've inspired. Movement's key. You know, the one thing that really keeps us stuck is because we're sedentary, we don't move. I was 18 stone. I used to walk up the shop and be out of breath and less mag. Running, even at 18 stone, helped me for a period of time.
Do you want to know something mad? I don't think you were listening the other day because we had a guest on, Ahmed Hankir, who's a professor. He's a consultant psychiatrist that works in London, Ontario, and at Cardiff University, and he's written a book about his own mental health issues. And his mum and dad are currently in Lebanon, being relocated from the bombing campaign there, and he's obviously worried to death about them. And before he came into the studio, he was conscious of his own mental health teetering a bit. He went on a 15-kilometre run that very morning, and that happened on this programme on Tuesday. So that thing that you're talking about might sound a bit glib or a bit obvious, but I was literally sitting here with a psychiatrist 2 days ago describing to me the importance of the 15-kilometre run he'd just been on to deal with the horrors that were currently unfolding in his life, in his family's life.
Yeah, it's
all
movement. I mean, they talk about it, depression. You're meant to move. You do the all these.
But if the more depressed you are, the harder it can sometimes feel to do it.
I'm telling you, it's almost impossible. But
Yes.
this is where I say it's one step at a time. I read a book called Atomic Habits,
Oh,
and
yes.
it just taught me everything is just
Sold
one
so
step at a
many
time.
copies.
Just get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing book, and I'm talking about scientific basis. I'm talking about
Little
just simple
steps,
stuff,
little changes
steps.
that you can make. A bit like the late Michael Mosley's prescriptions as well. Yeah. And there it is. So just hearing it there, we all need help sometimes. And the idea that the NHS would provide it, and that the help that they provide might help some people who are off work long term, so some of the 2.8 million currently locked out of work due to ill health, back into work, it could be a good thing. It's just after 14 years of Tories essentially shouting stick, stick, stick and forgetting about carrot or care or concern, an arm around the shoulder, like Alex's friend taking him into the library, a bit of concern, little bits of explanation, little bits of help. But how do you present that to a community of people already bruised and in some cases bewildered? How do you present it to them in a way that doesn't sound like they're going to be cracking the whip behind you and, quotes, making you, end quotes, go to work? I don't know, is the short answer to that. I'll come to Damien first after the news headlines. And on a much, much, much lighter note, what is the relationship between Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, Mariah Carey and me? There's a little riddle for you to puzzle over during the next news headlines. What links Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick, Mariah Carey and your humble correspondent? I shall tell you after the very latest news headlines with Amelia Cox.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. Benjamin, you might have a point here. Hi, James, he writes. I think you've misunderstood the statement here, as the syntax is perhaps a little ambiguous. The phrase make finding a job is being applied to the recovery process, not the patient. It's not making the patient find a job. It's making finding a job part of the process. Do you know, I think you might be right, actually. But remember, I was trying to read it from the point of view of being one of the people that this is about, and therefore the ambiguity is unhelpful. But I think you're right. I think I probably did misread that. I wasn't expecting you to join in on the question of what is the link between myself, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch and Mariah Carey. It's pretty tenuous. And I've got a horrible feeling it's not quite as funny as some of the answers that you've actually provided. Pete says, I know this. You all have a vocal range of 5 octaves. If only. Adam, on a similar theme, says, is it that you've all got angelic singing voices? Paul says, I know this. You've all worn a Santa suit with a miniskirt and rolled around in the snow. Perish the thought. Is it that you're all divas? Asks Tom. I mean, that works, although that wasn't it. And Rich says, please God, you've all got albums coming out at Christmas. I think you might have mistyped there. I think there's a not missing from that sentence. And similarly, David says, is it that you have had massive Christmas hits? No, it's not that. And it's not something that we've all got in common. It's something that the first two did regarding me that made me think of the third one. Shall I explain a little better? I don't know if you picked up on this at Conservative Party conference yesterday.
And then, there's David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, living proof that there is a more annoying LBC presenter than James O'Brien.
Now, I was a bit cross because I thought he was the only one who had failed to observe the golden rule of political journalism, which is never, ever, ever let them know that they've got under your skin. Ever, ever, ever. But it isn't just Jenrick, because it turned out that Kemi Badenoch was on Ian Dale's show last week talking about that claim that she became working class when she went to work in McDonald's.
I was working class, and I don't care how many sort of private school people tell me, laugh, like James O'Brien, for instance, who's one of your colleagues, who seem to think it was very funny. I don't need to take lessons from somebody who went to Ampleforth. I know who I am.
Oh, of course you need to take lessons from somebody who went to Ampleforth. If the person who went to Ampleforth is one of the best teachers in the world, I'm not for a moment suggesting that I am. But the idea that you're working class if you worked in... That means I was working class when I worked in La Brasserie in Kidderminster. When I worked in River Island, I was. That's why it's hilarious, Kemi. Lighten up. But what's it got to do with Mariah Carey? Oh, yeah, that'll be it. It's 25 to 12. A lighter note than the conversation that is concerning us chiefly at this point in proceedings, a conversation about mental health and help, getting people back to work. Damien's in Cookham. Damien, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Thanks for taking my call. I'm a long-time listener, big fan.
Thank you. You're very welcome here.
I'm quite nervous, but I know it's only you. I do a very unstressful, and to a lot of people, a very kind of people would be envious of what I get to do every day. I'm a gardener. Today is a beautiful day. I'm in these lovely places. Right now, my anxiety levels are as high as they've been in a long time. I'm in a persistent dip at the moment that's gone on longer than my usual spells. I suffer with bipolar for the last 17 odd years.
Okay.
And I wouldn't normally call.
No.
I thought if
this one got you, didn't it? This one touched you.
If it could help either just me or anyone else listening, then it's worth a try.
Well, it's already helping. It's already. So there have been times when you haven't been able to work.
Yeah, I mean, this morning actually, I was half an hour late starting because instead of carrying on out the door like behind my wife and children who are off to school, I went back to bed for another half hour, despite it made me late to work for half an hour, but every sort of ounce of my being at the moment is just telling me to go back to bed and hide from the world, basically. And so, I had to kind of wrench myself to work today.
You're doing brilliantly. Not only have you wrenched yourself and got into work, you've found a national radio station as well. But the effort that it takes is something that I think other people struggle to understand sometimes.
Yeah, the point you were sort of talking about, people's inability to differentiate between, just feeling glum and feeling depressed.
Yes.
Like, if your team had just lost appallingly at the weekend, the fact that they might win brilliantly the next day isn't going to snap you out of your depression. When I'm feeling low, I can't find enjoyment in, or the normal level of enjoyment that I feel I should be finding in, beautiful things.
Yes.
I'm currently, I've just watched a kingfisher fly under a bridge right in front of me and land, and I'm just watching it right now, and that is beautiful. But
it's not hitting.
There's still part of me that just feels dark, and so that the difference between sadness and depression is just night and day.
That's beautifully put. Does the kingfisher touch the sides at all? Sorry, this is me being curious.
No, it does. It's beautiful, and they very rarely sit for you to actually see them. It's usually a flash.
I know.
Yeah, and
you've picked one there, Damien. I've got to tell you, because that is
like a moment.
That's one of my all-time favourites. I got a tiniest glimpse of one
while watching
in Brentford. There were a couple on the canal in Brentford. I got the tiniest glimpse of one out of the corner of my eye.
Just an electric blue flash.
That's exactly
right. This one is just sitting listening to me babble on.
You're not babbling on. What does help look like? So the things you can't do for yourself that perhaps an agency or the health service could do or has done.
You mentioned it's like a big part of it is dependent on your own luck with your boss or your family.
Yes.
The luckiest thing that ever happened to me was meeting my wife, and her family are gardeners. Her mum is like a local gardening guru, and her brother has his own gardening business. And so when I was still trying to pursue my original kind of career path, which was started in architecture and was like veering around in graphic design and art kind of based things. And like I was sort of hopping from place to place and struggling with my condition every now and then, and every time like I was between jobs due to my inability to just, function at a decent level. My brother-in-law, who had a gardening business, said, I can always do with a hand. So rather than, if you don't want to be stuck in bed again for today, just come and
you just need to believe you. You need to be believed, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. And so I just went and was kept busy with him. I wasn't, expecting to be remunerated, but he paid me for the labour that I was doing. Yeah. And after a few bouts of that, between trying to get back into the workplace, I was like, oh, actually, the thing that I've enjoyed most is this gardening thing. So I've fallen into that. I've been doing it for 8 years now, and I do count myself extremely lucky. But the depression and the bipolar doesn't disappear. It comes.
You manage it if you can.
Yeah.
On a good day. You've done important work today. Can I read you some of the messages that have come in while you've been talking?
Yes, please. Yeah, thanks.
So Natalie writes, this caller is so incredibly brave to talk about his mental health. We need more people like this to share their stories so that we can learn from each other and be less judgmental. Mike says, this guy's brilliant. He's perfectly explaining the condition. Callum says, this is beautifully put. I've had similar experiences over the last few years, and I could not have expressed it any better.
Well, that's very, very sweet. Thank you for reading those.
I could carry on.
No, it's all right. Don't worry. In terms of a prescription, I've for years now thought, for instance, few months ago, 6 months ago, say I was in a good place, and a friend of mine who works in the film industry, I learned that he had been out of work for about 6 months and was sort of descending into a dark place.
Yes.
And he hadn't told me, so I said to him, we can always use help if you just want to come and bag up the leaves that I'm doing hedges, and you can bag up this. And he came back and did that, and he loved it for the week or two that he was with me. I loved it because he's an old mate, and we were chatting again. And all of a sudden, he had 3 sort of opportunities that arose that after 6 months of nothing, because I think in part in his mentality, he was back in a better place. He was opportunities were arising, and he only stuck around for a couple of weeks because he said, I've got these 2 job offers. I'm going to start at the end of the week. And my sort of thought is, if there was some kind of job sort of sharing scheme where, often I find I enjoy the gardening, but there's a lot mentally that I feel I can contribute to things and I don't get to with my job. And, if someone just needed some menial kind of office work done for a couple of hours and I could sit and input numbers and feel like I'm contributing and doing something slightly different to the day-to-day. Yeah. And likewise, my friend who, was just bagging leaves for me.
You've completely opened up this topic in a way that I don't think I could have done anyone without your experiences could have done. Doing revealing what I spent. You know me, mate. I spent 20 minutes trying to say what you've said in a couple of sentences.
Well, I've been thinking about this sort of idea and how it could possibly come to fruition, and I wouldn't know where to start with something like that, but.
But people need to listen. Yeah. People, and that's that is hopefully what they are talking about and what they are thinking about is making it an act of love, almost making it an act of care rather than an act of coercion, which is what it sounded like under the last government, as if they would push you through the door, push you into doing things. Thank you, David.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you.
And is the kingfisher still there?
He is actually. It's amazing.
I'm looking at Keith. I've got Keith in front of me. You've got a bloody kingfisher.
I'll try and get a picture.
I'd love that.
I'll send it to you.
I'd love that. Take care, man.
Thanks. You too. Keep doing what you do because you keep me on the straight and narrow. I really mean that. Don't stop doing what you do.
All right, it's a deal.
All right.
And you keep putting one foot in front of the other, yeah.
Yeah, will do. Thanks.
On we go. God bless. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
49 minutes after 11 is the time. Extraordinary, really. You're not the only one who did a bit of a double take when one of Boris Johnson's bag carriers popped up in the news bulletin, 20 minutes ago, talking about Keir Starmer giving back some of the hospitality he received that he that did not involve the breaking of any rules whatsoever, and which we only know about because he declared it. Private Eye, always very helpful at times like this, reminds us that the amount in gifts, donations and credit guarantees we know that Boris Johnson accepted for his wedding interior decoration and lifestyle expenses while earning £164,000 a year was £936,000. Okay? And you'll remember that £800,000 worth of that, or at least a significant amount of that, they desperately tried to keep quiet after the bloke that he put in charge of the BBC helped facilitate a credit loan, because living on £164,000 a year was something that Boris Johnson was incapable of contemplating. It's a figure that is almost dwarfed by the amount in free accommodation and donations Boris Johnson accepted in just 4 months, count them, 4 months, post Downing Street. That figure was £1,060,500, and he is believed to have earned during that time 1.3 million quid. So just listen out for the tummy ticklers and the client journalists and the right wing columnists pretending that the Keir Starmer story is huge or massive, and not even mentioning the attempt to keep secret an £800,000 loan facility facilitated by a bloke that he subsequently made chairman of the BBC. It's a mad old world. And in fact, as evidence of how mad this old world can be, I've got another clip of Kemi Badenoch for you, which I think is pertinent to the story that we are about to discuss next.
There is a serious question here. One is that we don't have a conflict of interest, that we are not taking bribes, and that there's no hypocrisy. And I think that Labour looks to have possibly failed on all three of those counts, and that's why there is an issue.
So, lo and behold, Kemi Badenoch, it is reported yesterday, is running her Tory leadership campaign from the house of a man called Neil Record, who has links to the Institute of Economic Affairs, where he was, I think, chairman, the Restore Trust organisation that sought to challenge, if you like, the National Trust over its practice of publishing the history of National Trust properties in National Trust properties. And he's also involved in Net Zero Watch, which is an organisation dedicated to promoting... Well, why don't we ask Sam Bright? Sam's an investigative journalist and the UK deputy editor of DeSmog, an organisation providing facts about global warming as well as working to dismantle misinformation campaigns. So she, who would be leader of the Conservative Party, is accusing other people of hypocrisy while running her own campaign from the house of Neil Record. In the context of your field of expertise, Sam, what do we know about Neil Record and Net Zero Watch?
Yes, well, pleasure to be on, James. Neil Record is the chair of Net Zero Watch, so he holds a very senior role at the organisation. And Net Zero Watch is essentially a climate denial campaign group. So it's attached to the Global Warming Policy Foundation, another vaguely named Tufton Street group. And they essentially campaign against clean, renewable energy. The GWPF in particular, so the parent organisation, seeks to deny or downplay the fact that man-made climate change is in fact happening. And they're part of this sort of cabal that you've written about extensively. And
so have you.
Also,
I relied on you to do what I did. So let's be clear about where the credit lies on this front, Sam.
That's far too kind of you, James. But yeah, they want to see a sort of bonfire of regulations in Britain that would turn our country into sort of a Texas upon Thames. And Neil Record is very much at the forefront of that.
We know also that he's given £10,000 to Kemi Badenoch's leadership campaign. And she said on stage yesterday, let's get this quote correct, "I'm not a climate sceptic, but I am a net zero sceptic. I did not become an MP to deliver a plan led by Ed Miliband." So, I mean, given what you've told us about the role of Net Zero Watch in public discourse, that looks like money well spent.
Yeah, and I think this is a broad trend among the Conservative Party as a whole. We reported on the fact at DeSmog that between the 2019 general election and the 2024 contest, the party received £8.4 million from climate science deniers, from fossil fuel interests, and from major polluters. So this is, Kemi is very much fitting into the pattern of what is happening in the Conservative Party at the minute, and that's reflected in its net zero policies.
Thank you, Sam Bright, author of Bullingdon Club Britain and the UK deputy editor of DeSmog. He's a busy man, this Neil Record, when he's not hosting Kemi Badenoch in his lavish London townhouse. He's also, as Peter Geoghegan will tell us, a former chair, I think, of the so-called Institute of Economic Affairs, Peter. So what do we know about that?
Well, he's former chair, but still life president, James.
Oh, gosh.
A grand title, yeah. So James.
But hang on a minute. Isn't the Institute of Economic Affairs the place that's widely regarded as having been the sort of petri dish for Liz Truss's premiership?
Very much so. That's exactly where people.
And now the life president is trying to get another person to the top of the Conservative Party, or helping another person get to that. Have they learned nothing?
Well, maybe they might look upon it and say it went so well the first time. Maybe they're looking for more than 49 days in the job.
I mean, the triple, and we're going to find out a little bit more about Restore Trust in a moment as well, which is another organisation with which he's heavily involved. How do we describe their mission statement or their mission in public discourse, the IEA?
Well, very much. So the IEA would see themselves as being at the forefront of cutting red tape, of shrinking the state, etc. Very much the Liz Truss budget, the disastrous budget that we still talk about, well, the fiscal event, because let's not forget it wasn't actually a budget, that was the IEA in action. Tax cuts for the wealthy, and a shrunken state and less public services for everybody else, for all of us. The incredible thing about the IEA in many respects was just how much influence they were able to bear on the British government not too long ago. So what you have is Neil Record left as chairman of the IEA in 2023, so after Liz Truss. But as Liz Truss was was actually put on record by Tim Montgomery, the former Conservative advisor, incubated Liz Truss. So Liz Truss's ideas really came from the IEA.
They were boasting. I remember they were boasting about the fact that she was the MP who'd attended more of their events, I think, than any other. And I think Mark Littlewood, who was the I forget what job titles they give themselves, Lord High Panjandrum, I think, he described Liz Truss's fiscal event in the most glowing of terms.
This was the IEA in action. This is what Neil Record had. This is what the Neil Record is a life president of. He's also a very prominent Conservative donor. He gave lots of money to various to the party, as well as, if you remember, a former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. It was very much he gave £32,000 to Matt Hancock over the years. He's given quite large sums to Tories over the years. And as we can see now, he seems to have a particular shine for one of the would-be leaders.
He's described her as having stardust that reminds him of Margaret Thatcher. Thank you, Peter Geoghegan, author of Democracy for Sale and editor of the Substack Democracy for Sale. And finally, Rowan Moore, the architecture critic for The Observer and author of Property, The Myth That Built the World. He's a busy man, this Neil Record, when he's not giving donations to the Conservative Party or being life president of the IEA or running or keeping a hand on the tiller of Net Zero Watch. He's also heavily involved in Restore Trust. Rowan, what can you tell us about Restore Trust?
Well, Restore Trust is what you call an AstroTurf organisation. That is to say, it's something that sort of purports to speak for kind of grassroots, for the people, but actually is pretty opaque about where its money comes from and who its members are. Its aim in life is to kind of capture the leadership of the National Trust, the extremely successful, well-beloved organisation, basically because they think it's too woke. So they want to de-wokeify it.
And by woke, I always pressure people to tell us exactly what they mean by when they use that word, albeit that you are merely the vessel on this occasion through which their use of the word woke is deployed. What do they mean when they use that word? What would they consider to be woke?
The thing that really got them going is that in 2020, the National Trust commissioned a report looking at the links between their properties and slavery and colonisation, which is...
What, actual historical facts, you mean?
A matter of historical fact. It was simply a report. It made no recommendations. The thing that really annoyed them was the National Trust owned Chartwell, which was Winston Churchill's house, and this report made the truthful statement that Winston Churchill opposed Indian independence. That's what kicked it off, and since then, every year, and it's coming up again this autumn, they try and get a slate of candidates elected to the National Trust Council, which is a kind of advisory body. And then they get upset about other things, which then get amplified by certain right-wing newspapers, like
chiefly the Daily Telegraph, I think,
and the Daily Mail.
And the Daily Mail, as nobody will be surprised to hear. So, goodness me, what an extraordinary, active individual he is. Has anyone ever voted for him? He seems to wield extraordinary influence.
Not I'm aware of. No.
Okay, Ryan Moore. Thank you. Architecture critic for The Observer, Peter Geoghegan, the author of Democracy for Sale, and Sam Bright, the investigative journalist, looking at just some of the strings to the bow of the man who has lent Kemi Badenoch his luxurious London townhouse from which to run her campaign. She has declared £10,000 donation from Neil Record, but she hasn't thus far declared the loan of the property as it's a flat, I think, not a townhouse, forgive me. Oh, no, that was what Keir Starmer borrowed from Lord Wahid Ali, his parliamentary colleague in the Labour Party, about which Kemi Badenoch had plenty to say.
There is a serious question here. One is that we don't have a conflict of interest, that we are not taking bribes, and that there's no hypocrisy. And I think that Labour looks to have possibly failed on all three of those counts, and that's why there is an issue.
Kemi Badenoch is running her Tory leadership campaign from the house of a wealthy donor, and as yet that support has not been declared on the financial interests register for members of Parliament. A brilliant scoop there by Lucy White at Bloomberg.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is Mystery Hour, crikey, that's taken me by surprise, so goodness knows what kind of reaction you're currently having. It means, because I completely forgot to mention it up until this moment in time, you've got a better chance of getting through than you would have in normal weeks, when every time I remind you at about 10 to 12 that Mystery Hour's on the way, the switchboard fills up and I can't get any calls on the subject that I'm actually talking about, which was, for most of the last hour, about government plans to help people back into work if they are off with long-term sickness, particularly in the realms of mental health. So allow me to draw a line under that by reading this rather powerful message. James, I thank you for taking this hour to talk about anxiety and depression. So many people do not understand, even if they try. I've just had a bout of severe depression and anxiety myself, and I'm now on the up. I know I'll be back at work in a couple of weeks, and it's something I can now actually look forward to. To everyone struggling, please don't lose hope. People can and do get better. All my love to anybody suffering. So this is your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. You have a question, a mystery, a conundrum, a riddle bubbling away in the back of your brain, or possibly even on the tip of your tongue, and you know it must have an answer. And you know that the massed ranks of Mystery Hour listeners will almost certainly be able to come up with that answer. So you ring in with the question, 0345 6060 973, and you ring in with the answer, 0345 6060 973. Not the same person, obviously, that'd be weird. My favourite contribution of the day receives a Mystery Hour board game. I was about to make a comment about podcasts there, but you could still, no, you couldn't. No, I'm going to award it by 1 o'clock today. So if you're listening on the podcast, it's already gone. It's already been awarded. Full terms and conditions for this competition can be found at lbc.co.uk. More details and indeed opportunities to buy your own Mystery Hour board game can be found at Mystery Hour, or one word, mysteryhour.co.uk. I think that pretty much does it, doesn't it? 12:07 is the time. It's Thursday. That can mean only one thing. Mystery Hour is upon us. Mitch is in Luton. Mitch, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Mitch.
Good afternoon, James. Lovely to speak with you again.
Likewise, Mitch.
And given the state of the water companies and water, excuse the pun, I know this is a fluid question, but how long is tap water safe to drink once it's taken from the tap?
You mean if you keep it in a bottle?
Correct, yeah, because I fill my water bottles up with tap water, and I put them in my rucksack and carry them around with me.
Yeah.
And then I think, after a while, if I haven't drunk it, is it still safe to drink? And I think maybe after a couple of weeks, it probably needs to be changed, but I just don't know.
A couple of weeks in your rucksack?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I mean, the only way I don't know that I'll be able to answer this. I mean, it's safe in the sense of it's not going to get polluted as a consequence of being in a sealed bottle in your rucksack. But bottled water has a sell-by date, doesn't it? It has a use-by date because particularly plastic bottles, I think like microplastics. I don't know why I'm talking, Mitch. I don't know why I'm trying to answer this question. I'm sorry. I started off so confidently there. I was kind of thinking, yeah, well, because I think we've had the question about why does water have a sell-by date or a use-by date on it, and I think the answer is going to be part of the answer to your question, isn't it? Probably.
Okay. Well, I guess they just put so many things in water, don't they? That additives into it.
No. But that isn't going to change in the course of it being in your rucksack. It's not going to become less safe for a reason that is in the water when it comes out of the tap. If it becomes less drinkable, it will be because of something that's happened to the water in the vessel, in the flask.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
I think.
So how long is that?
How long is a piece of string?
Exactly. How long is a drop of water?
I will be surprised if we get a definitive answer to this, Mitch, but I'm not ruling it out.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Mitch. 12:09 is the time. 03456060973 is the number. Andy's in Morden. Andy, question or answer?
I've got a question for you, James.
Carry on.
What makes an English county a shire? So you will have got Hampshire, but you've got Sussex and Surrey.
Yes, we could be here a while. Are you going to go through all of them?
Yeah, so you've got Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex.
Yes.
They're not shires, but then you've got Cambridgeshire, Devonshire, but Cornwall isn't a shire.
Is it Devonshire? I always think of it as Devon.
Devonshire, maybe not. Maybe it's just Devon.
Maybe it was Devonshire once. I don't know.
You've got Shropshire.
Start again. Slow down. Start again. No, start again. What was the first one?
So the first one's Hampshire.
Yeah.
Hampshire, but Sussex and Surrey aren't because they border them. You've got Shropshire.
No, that's it. My theory's gone. Worcestershire would have been an example. I was thinking that it's to do with county towns, but that doesn't work either. Why are some counties shires and other counties aren't? I know a bit of the answer.
Go on then.
The Anglo-Saxons, like Anglo-Saxon jurisdictions, if you like. Do you see what I mean? So I think you've heard of the hundreds. There's and I think a shire is one up from 100. So some of them will throw back to Anglo-Saxon eras, and presumably the ones that aren't shires are a bit more modern inventions, but I don't know.
Then you've got County Durham, which is neither.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. That's come up in the past as well. County Durham. And remember, things change. Like, a lot of people are still very unhappy about South Yorkshire and Humberside, and the governments make decisions to change these designations over the years, but we'll focus exclusively.
Not to mention Rutland. I mean, that's been gone for years.
Well, precisely. We will focus and Wessex as well. We will focus exclusively on the question of why some counties are shires and other counties are not.
Absolutely, thank you.
No, thank you. It is 11 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I wonder if I'm going to be able to get the county right for every town of every caller for the rest of Mystery. Should I try? It shouldn't be that hard, should it? Unless you're ringing from a really obscure place. Rob is in Lichfield in Staffordshire.
Correct. That is right.
Question or answer, Rob?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
What is it that makes your blood run cold? Like, what's the physiological reaction that causes the sensation of your blood running cold?
What are we talking about? Are we talking about that weird shiver?
Yeah, sort of thing. So I enjoy fail videos a bit more than I should do. And the ones where people fall...
Me too. It drives Eleanor potty. I'm constantly calling her over in the morning when we're supposed to be putting a show together and showing her footage of someone slipping over on ice or something like that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
They're addictive, aren't they?
They are, very much. But the ones that get me are the ones where you see people on push bikes and they'll fall over and they'll skin themselves on the road.
I just did it.
That happen a lot.
I just did it.
What causes that?
Shiver.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Because I thought it might be adrenaline, but it's not scary or exciting in any way, shape, or form.
It's hard to see what the evolutionary purpose of it would be in terms of. So yeah, and you get it slightly unexpected places as well, don't you? Sometimes you kind of like as if I think the phrase used to be someone's walked over your grave as well. You get that?
Yeah, similar sort of thing.
Like a weird shiver or your blood running cold. What is going on? Asks Rob in Lichfield. I like that. It's already over. I'm not going to know the county here. I know that your Bangor is in Northern Ireland, but I don't know which county it's in, which is to my shame. Anyway, Russ is there. Russ, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
This has been keeping me awake at night, given all the stuff that's going on in the world right now. Cans. You get a tin of tuna, and you have to use a tin opener. You get a tin of sweet corn, and it's got a ring pull on it. Who makes that decision? Is it a factory thing? Is it the goods that are in the tin? It's a worrying thing.
County Down. County Down. I should have known that.
County Down,
I apologise for that.
No, it's fine. No, yeah. At least you didn't say I was in Wales.
No, you could have been. I still wouldn't have known what county you're in. I'm just advertising my England, Anglo-centric world outlook, aren't I, at the moment? So it was a stupid idea to even start playing that game. Let's pretend it never happened. So why do some cans have ring pulls and other cans don't?
Yeah. Is that just like cheap factories versus cool factories, or is it the goods that are inside the tin?
Have we not, Keith? Have we not had this before? Do you not remember?
You haven't, because I've been trying to get it on for about a year. And
really?
I never make it up the queue. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
No, it's a nice question. I tried. What could it be? I know we did the corned beef one. Why corned beef has a key on it? Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah,
the
key thing wasn't that? That must have been to do with the war and stuff, because soldiers used to take it to war, didn't they?
Yeah, but that wouldn't explain why they still have it now, would it? It's to do with the shape of the tin or something, so it all comes out in a nice block or something like that, and it needs a key because an old tin opener couldn't go round corners. I made that up, but it sounds plausible. I will find out for you. Why do some cans have ring pulls while other cans still? Are you sure? Doesn't tuna have ring pulls now?
I'll go in the kitchen now and I'll look through my cupboards if you want, mate.
Yeah, I do want you to. I think tuna has ring pulls on it now.
No, it doesn't.
It does.
Not even the posh stuff.
Really? What have you got?
Hang on.
Right.
Let me have a look.
I will.
Stay there.
Hang on. I will.
Stay there.
I've got nothing else to do, mate. I'll be...
Good. Okay, we're going to go through my cupboards, mate.
Yeah.
Here we go. Right, then.
You say the tin and I'll say whether it's got a ring pull or not. What?
Prince's tuna, no ring pull.
What date? What date is it? Could have been there for years.
No, it came from Sainsbury's last week, mate.
Oh, all right.
Other stores are available.
No ring pull.
Muti Polpo chopped tomatoes, very posh ones, mate.
They're nice.
Ring pull.
Ring pull, yeah.
Yeah, Heinz beans, ring pull. Let's see what else we got.
Hang on, wait there. Keith, alert the award ceremony judges, all right? Alert all the radio award ceremony. Carry on, Russ.
I don't know what you were doing then. My wife goes out shopping. Pirello, what are those things?
Tyres.
Olives, mate.
In a tin. In a tin. Ring pull all day long. All right, so just tuna. So maybe there's an answer here. Tuna.
It could be a fishy question.
It could be a very fishy question, or the fish could be the clincher. We shall find out for you, Russ. Enjoy. What are you having for lunch?
I don't know yet. I've got an Nduja pork pie.
Get you! Oh, that does sound nice. It's 12:16.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Listen, stop sending me pictures of tins of tuna with ring pulls on them. Actual pictures. I wouldn't believe you. Of course, I believe you, but it doesn't alter the premise of the question, which is why do some tins have ring pulls and some tins don't? Admittedly, it confuses the issue slightly. For Russ, because he was we and me, because I thought I'd seen a ring pull on a tin of tuna, but obviously we thought there was something about tuna that would explain why they have no ring pulls while other tins have ring pulls. It clearly can't be that because ring pulls something tuna tins, beans. Answer 0345 6060 973. Glenn's in Basildon. Glenn, question or answer?
Answer, mate. Let's talk about shires.
It's an Anglo-Saxon.
Of course it is, mate. Of course it is. Now, it was originally spelled S-C-I-R.
Skier.
Sheer.
Sheer.
S and C is the equivalent of modern SH in Old English.
Of course it is, yeah. Sorry, mate.
Sheer.
And just for people who don't know, Glenn is practically fluent in Anglo-Saxon, and I am not. No, I know not quite. To be fair, Glenn, all the years you've been ringing in to answer Anglo-Saxon questions, you should be fluent by now.
Yeah, but I've got other hobbies.
That's very true. That's very true. Carry on.
Right, so, and the coin of the shire was known as a shilling. So that's where we get the term shilling.
Yes. Oh, look at that. Okay.
Right, now, a shire tradition was actually a measurement of land. So the Anglo-Saxons measured their farmland in hides. And our hide is roughly 100 to 120 acres.
Yeah.
100 hides make 100.
I got that bit right. I got that bit right.
I was listening. I was listening. You're doing well, James.
Nice one, thank you.
And I can't remember the exact measurement, but I think it's 10 hundreds make a shire.
Okay.
So Devonshire would have been Devonshire. Oxfordshire was Oxfordshire, and things like that. And we actually pronounce, when we say, for example, Oxfordshire, we're actually saying shire correctly.
Yeah, you're right.
Rather than just saying shire.
Worcestershire. So that's why some are called shires.
That's it.
And the ones that are not will not have their roots in Anglo-Saxon divisions.
They would have. No, they would have been Anglo-Saxon places. But it's like anything. Why do we call some areas land and some areas like I don't know, Mons or whatever? You know what I mean? Or hill.
Yeah.
It's just the Anglo-Saxons decide to call that area a shire rather than land or place.
Would it have had a kind of a lord or something in place? Maybe.
They would have had this is where we get it. They would have had a reeve or a rever.
There you go.
Known as a shire rever, which is where we get the word sheriff.
Sheriff, yeah. I could have got it's all coming. It's all coming together. So
yeah.
So some of the counties that are not shires will have the same history as the counties that do. It's just the lap of the gods on whether or not they were called shires back in the day, or
pretty much.
Yeah, fair. So pretty Sussex. What's the derivation of Sussex? Do we know?
South Saxon.
South Saxon. So there it is. That proves it's Saxon, doesn't it? Sussex, and the same with Wessex, West Saxon, Essex,
West
East
Saxons.
Saxon. Why is there no sex?
Because they would have been Angles and not Saxons.
As like a vow of celibacy.
No, they were Angles, quite simply.
Oh, is that a god? Well, there you go. So, all right, got it. Well, look at that. Qualifications?
I love Anglo-Saxon history.
Well, I do too every time I talk to you. That's lovely stuff. Well played, Glenn.
Thank you very much, mate.
Thank you very much. I thought the joke deserved more. I'm not going to lie. I thought the no sex, vow of celibacy, not Essex, Wessex, Sussex, no sex, not sex, vow of celibacy. No? All right, just me. Joe's in Forest Hill. Joe, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Joe.
I've wanted to learn how to do sign language for the longest.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, have deaf people created slang within the sign language? So, or have they created, when we were younger, people used to talk gibberish.
Yes.
I wonder if they've created a little secret language that only two mates can learn. So,
gosh, well, you wouldn't have to be deaf to do that, would you?
I mean, but that's what I mean. So, you obviously, as you learn sign language,
if you know BSN, if you've learnt sign language, then can you kind of ad lib almost? You're asking, aren't you? Can you kind of extemporize? Well, what do we mean by slang? Don't swear. What do we mean by slang?
I mean, maybe not slang, but even Cockney slang or anything like that. Have they created signs that could mean two things, but if you're from a certain area, it would only mean
like apples and pears or something like that.
Exactly like that. Yeah.
Okay, I very, very much doubt it. But I don't know. And it's it's an interesting thing to be interested about. And also, Joe, when you say you've wanted to learn sign language for the longest time, why haven't you?
Just I've not been exposed to. I don't really have any deaf mates or anything. To be fair, I want to learn it, but I've not had nothing to give me a push. To be fair,
it's an answer, isn't it? You're like Glenn with his Anglo-Saxon. He doesn't have any Anglo-Saxon mates, but he still learned the language. It's 23 minutes after 12. Anne-Marie, it says here in the Swiss Alps. Can we be a bit more specific, please, Anne-Marie?
I'm 1 hour from Zurich. Hi, James.
Hello.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. I've always wanted to say that.
Wow, this is exciting. Question, how near Mont Blanc are you?
No, I'm just at the start of the Alps in a very tiny village called Amden. It's very, very beautiful.
Oh, delightful. Question or answer? Carry on.
So I've been living here for 6 years, and I would say that I have intermediate German language level now.
Oh, yes. It's a very linguistic little run of questions, this, from Anglo-Saxon to sign language to German. Carry on.
And I feel like the more I improve my German, sometimes I start to forget English words.
Really?
I obviously can still speak English, but if, for example, somebody would ask me, what does that mean? I feel like I kind of get like a brain freeze. Like, why does that happen? Why do I kind of forget my, words from my native tongue?
How often do you speak English these days?
Oh, all of the time.
Oh,
my boyfriend is German, but we communicate in English together, yeah.
So at home you're speaking English all the time? But when you're out, you're speaking German all the time, or trying to, most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time mixed. I've got like a mixture.
Can I ask you a personal question? Would you mind?
Mm.
How old are you?
Go for it. I'm 46.
Yeah, that's an interesting age.
What are you going to say? Could it be like menopause or something?
Good Lord, I would not. I mean, even if I was thinking that, Anne-Marie, there's no way I'm going to say it out loud. No, but I think that I started finding it a little bit harder to remember words and things around about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I was 46, 47. So it may not have anything to do with the increasing facility for German. It may just be that our brains are ever so slightly winding down. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, is that so? What we want to know, is there a relationship between learning a new language and forgetting some of the old one?
Yeah.
Like we have a finite amount of space in our brain for language. It's unlikely, isn't it? Isn't it more likely? So I don't know if you've ever noticed me doing it. I'd like to think that 10 years ago, I could pluck every single word that I wanted out of my own vocabulary without even pausing. But now sometimes I say on air, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not there anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
but, I noticed as well with native German speakers, if you ask them, what does that mean again in their language?
Yeah.
And sometimes they would say they would have the same experience with
but they're old as well, aren't they? They're middle-aged. Aren't they?
They might be old, yeah.
You see? I'll find out for you, but I don't think we're going to like the answer to this one, Anne-Marie. I don't think either of us going to that is just getting old. There's not much of a silver lining to that part of it. I shall find out for you. So that is whether or not learning a new language compromises your ability to remember the old one. 12:26 is the time. Anne-Marie, take care. Dave's in North Shields. Dave, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on, Dave.
Hello. So basically, I was wondering, why do people get monkeys and apes confused? It's something I've noticed throughout my time. So one of the bench has got a book where you press a button and it tells you what the animal is.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
When you press the button, it says monkey.
Right.
So one of the teachers at the Ben's nursery, she had this little gorilla, and she's going, "Oh, look at the monkey." And I said, "Wow, it's not a monkey, it's an ape, it's a gorilla." And I find this throughout. I've seen it on the telly, all over social media. Monkeys and apes, they're not the same. Why is that? Do people just not care?
So what's an ape then?
A gorilla, an orangutan, a bonobo, chimpanzee. Monkeys are generally smaller with tails.
A bonobo. A bonobo.
A bonobo. It's a bit like a chimp.
A bonobo. I get it. Yeah. It comes up quite a lot on. I do this word game every morning it's on the New York Times app, Spelling Bee, where you've got to make words. It gives you 7 letters. You've got to make as many words as you can out of them. And I always get bonbon, and then as soon as I get bonbon, I get bonobo. Bonobo. I don't say it as winningly as you do. It suits your accent, that word, more than almost any other word in the English language.
Because I say it all the time, because I'm always arguing with people who think that monkeys are apes.
When you say all the time, Dave, in a week, in an average week, how many arguments will you have about monkeys and apes?
Oh, a couple of times, because it's everywhere, and I don't know if it's just me that's noticing it, or if people just don't care. When I question people about it, sometimes they look at us and they go, "Oh, who do you think you are, like David Attenborough?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, I know the difference between a monkey and an ape. So why do people do they just not care?
We're apes, aren't we? Are we apes?
Yes, we are apes. Yes, we're apes.
And so, what's the distinction then? What's the definition?
Well, I'm not David Attenborough.
No,
but I know that monkeys are smaller with tails generally, and apes are big, more like us.
I suppose most people listening to this program would prove your point, wouldn't it? Well, like most people would not, when pushed, be able to tell you what the difference between an ape and a monkey was. Are all apes monkeys?
No, apes aren't monkeys.
I'm going to get you cross now, aren't I? He's going to have a go at me. He's going to come for me.
That's different. Well, I could be wrong. Maybe somebody.
But monkeys aren't apes, and apes aren't monkeys. They are completely different simiforms.
Yes. So like people used to say Michael Jackson had a monkey. He had a chimpanzee.
And did that used to really wind you up?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
But I'm teaching this to my kids.
How often would you correct people who said that Michael Jackson had a monkey?
All the time.
Would you never let it go?
Mm-mm.
You'd never let it slide. You'd never once say, "That's all right. Don't worry."
If you're on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and there's a picture of a chimpanzee and you say that it's a monkey,
yeah,
you're wrong.
You're wrong.
Unless they might say, actually, yeah, you're right.
Because so few people care.
Because they don't care.
Well, it's an odd question. I don't know that anyone will know the answer definitively. It's fascinating, mate. But I don't know that anyone is going to know the definitive answer to why the distinction between apes and monkeys is so widely either ignored or not understood.
Yeah.
Are they all primates?
Well, I don't know. Somebody can tell me.
Before you go, it's on the board. I'll try and get you an answer. But would you just say that word once more?
Bonobo.
Have a great day. Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. How long does water stay drinkable if you take it out the tap and put it in a flask or a bottle? We've done Shires. What is happening when your blood runs cold? You get that weird shiver. You watch something happen to someone else and you sort of, like that. I can't read my own bloody writing. Oh, why do some tins have ring pulls and other tins don't? Is there any slang in sign language? That was Joe, wasn't it? Do you lose... If you're learning a new language, do you forget some of the old one, or is it just old age when you start struggling to remember words or meanings? And why are we so negligent as a society about the distinction between apes, including bonobos, and monkeys, including... Oh no, he's going to kill me if I get this wrong. I'll leave it there. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. We like that, Dave. It says Kate says you're the second best caller ever, second only to the guy who made James cry a few weeks ago when he was talking about having listened to the show in jail. I didn't cry. I had something in my eye. How dare you? What do you think I am? Perry's in Canary Wharf. Perry, question or answer?
Hi, James. Yeah, I've got a question.
Carry on, Perry.
Okay, a little bit of background first. I've almost completed 40 years in the IT industry. Okay. I've seen a lot of changes in that time.
You certainly have.
Particularly when the internet really took off, and more recently AI, and we use AI quite a lot. So my question really is not so much about artificial intelligence, it's about artificial consciousness. And I'm just wondering, will we ever be able to, or rather, what actually needs to happen to get to the stage where we have artificial consciousness, i.e. that the machine, maybe we wouldn't even call it machine, is self-aware, is sentient.
Well, I mean, shouldn't you know the answer to this?
No, I don't know the answer to that.
You've done nearly 40 years in IT.
Yeah, I think it's a bit deeper than that. I think this goes into neuroscience and computer science.
Philosophy more. It's more philosophy, I think, than computer science. Neuroscience, maybe. So, what is consciousness? Is what you're asking, and can it ever be emulated in a machine?
Exactly, and what needs to happen to get there? Because if you did, it would have a profoundly better user experience. You know, you can imagine an entity that has genuine empathetic interaction with you, rather than just
you
type something and you get a good answer.
But you could teach it to be empathetic, couldn't you? You could, but that's not consciousness, though. I don't know what
exactly.
Oh Lord above, this is like a philosophy. Like, what is consciousness? The awareness of my own existence.
Yeah, and I think if we do get an answer, it's going to be down the lines of we probably need to figure out our own consciousness before we could kind of put it into a machine.
A lot of philosophers have tried to do that. I'm thinking of Descartes' brain in a vat and other sort of 19th century continental philosophers, David Hume as well, epidemiology. I'd be amazed if you get an answer to this.
Well, yeah, I think you're possibly right, but there may be some kind of clever PhD students that doing those sorts of things.
True.
Computer science
so what is consciousness?
Neuroscience are heading down that journey.
All right, let's find out. What was your first entry into the world of IT and computers?
It's a while ago. I used to work in New Zealand.
Not as a job, as a person, as a kid or whatever. What was the first thing you did? What was your first computer?
Oh, okay. I had those what they called a BBC
Micro.
Oh God, BBC Micro, and I started doing some.
At home, you had one of those.
Early, basic.
You had one of those at home.
At home, yeah.
Oh, flipping heck! Well, you've spoilt my setup there, but I like the question a lot. I was hoping you'd say ZX Spectrum, and then I could have effortlessly moved to the fact that I'm doing one of the weirdest things I've done in a long time tonight, is that I am on stage at the world premiere of a film about the ZX Spectrum called The Rubber-Keyed Wonder, made by a lovely couple called Anthony and Nicola Caulfield. And I think I'm there as the sort of idiot games player from the 1980s with some members of Sir Clive Sinclair's family, and that is happening tonight at the BFI IMAX. I think it kicks off at 6:30 or maybe slightly earlier, but it's one of those things. Quite often in my life I get asked to do things and they're about 6 months away, so I just say yes, and then as they get closer I think, why on earth did I say yes to that? This one is the exact opposite. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. I got such fond memories of playing on my ZX Spectrum back in the day. I can't wait to be in a room full of people who know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that, unlike the room I'm in at the moment. Thank you, Perry. Gavin's in Hull. Gavin, question or answer?
Answer for the sign language slang question.
Oh, good man. Carry on.
Yeah, so I've been signing about 20 years. My first girlfriend, when I was at college, both her parents were deaf.
Oh.
And, well, her mum was actually the sign language teacher.
Okay.
And she was a teaching assistant and, sort of went from there.
So you learnt it to...
I was doing it for my Duke of Edinburgh, actually.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
I needed to learn a skill.
What did you do? Did you fall in love with your sign language teacher's daughter, or did you learn sign language because you'd fallen in love with her?
Kind of both. We just got aligned together. But funnily enough, to understand how the slang works, is you have to really sort of take a step back and see how the language works.
Yes.
And really that it's actually much more regional than people really think.
Okay.
So the BSL you'll see on the BBC, I consider it quite London-centric. So there's different signs for the same word in different regions. And I believe all that comes from is the inability to transmit from that many places over long distance. So people in Hull would watch London-centric BSL on BBC and then talk to themselves. There wasn't, I assume we like the Skype and Zoom era. There are people now who, sign over a webcam. But if you take that out of the fairly recent equation, it becomes quite a closed circuit,
Okay.
So we would meet at, Thursday nights used to be go to the pub at the Deaf Institute in Hull.
Right.
And we'd all be signing, but we're all from Hull, so things would creep in. And then
give me? Can you describe it? What would creep in?
Yeah, so there's. I was always me and my girlfriend at the time were considered quite lazy signers, in that we tend to only use our right hand.
Yeah.
To sort of do half the sign. But,
okay. Okay. So it is like slang. It is like a shortened version of something, and you know that they know, and they know what you mean. But that would be geographically specific as well.
It would be, and then
brilliant answer.
Unofficially, I've sort of taught people sign language, people who want to work in special needs education and things like that, and give them a start sort of thing. And then they'd go, I've read in this book that actually this is the sign. And I'd have to say, this is terrible radio, obviously, for sign language, but some people...
I like it, though.
To sign the word fist, some people will put their thumb under their chin and then wiggle their other four fingers. Other people will make the sign that most people, even when they've been taught...
What was that the sign for?
For fish.
Fish?
Fish, yeah, which was quite a common one. And
so I wiggle the four fingers on the same hand that my thumb is under my chin for?
Yeah, a bit like when you were a kid.
I did it the other way. I just put my thumb under my chin and then waved at Keith with the other hand. So that's fish. You can't see me, but you know what I'm doing. That's fish. All right, so I think it's the first time we've done sign language on the radio. I'm not even sure it is the first time. Mate, I'm not joking. I don't think it is the first time we've done sign language on the radio. That's how wacky we are, Gavin. That's how wacky we are. So, what would be the slang version of fish?
Well, there wouldn't really be one. What it would more be is really strong contractions. Generally, disparaging words, like every slang, would creep in more than anything else. So the sign for pig is similar to the sign for egg if you just move your arm slightly. So there's a little, between me and my girlfriend, this bit of an egg, really. Because if you pull it up to your face, it's very, you can see it. Whereas if you just want to talk discreetly in a room full of people who can sign, you come up with a little shorthand and you...
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Contractions and it goes in. But, like I say, the key difference is it doesn't get transmitted from region to region like language does over the radio and television and words creep in, because unless you're directly interacting, you're not going to pick up the slang. So you might find a slang in Hull that means nothing. Anyway, as in proper, in inverted commas, proper signs are different from Scotland, London, the UK, and then
Wow, that's a superb answer. And you still use it a lot now?
Yeah, I've still got. I broke up with that young love thing. Broke up with that girlfriend nearly 20 years ago. But I've got friends who. Well, interestingly, I've got a friend who was deaf when I met him, and now he's got a cochlear implant. And I still find it difficult to talk to him the way we used to. It is like jumping language, but
you prefer your kind of your legacy, your linguistic legacy is signed. So that's how you feel more comfortable communicating with him.
The two of us, because we met in a nightclub.
Yeah. Wow.
And I always struggle to hear people. Talking in a nightclub, it's like you end up leaning in and you just sort of basically shout, "Are you all right? You all right?" Yeah. That's it. So then I saw, because he's quite tall as well, he stands out. So I saw my mate Dan signing, introduced myself, and then we would just chat away. You didn't have to lean in. You knew exactly what the other person was saying. Do you want a drink?
Oh, lovely. This is one of my favourite answers of all time, Gavin. I could listen to you all day. Have a round of applause. I already know what your qualifications are. You learnt sign language to pull a girl.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Pretty much.
There you go, an example to us all. Thank you to Andrew as well, who's just sent me a picture of those cooling towers that we were talking to James Graham about yesterday. The one's up in Ratcliffe on Soar. Andrew's just driving past, I think. Or no, I think are you on the train or are you driving up? You're not taking photographs while you're driving, Andrew, but goodness me. I saw something beautiful yesterday about someone who used to tell their kids that they were cloud factories. So when they were active, these enormous cooling towers, they used to be all over the country. I spoke to James Graham, the superb screenwriter, playwright, author, genius, yesterday about his desire to save the ones from his old neck of the woods in the East Midlands, South Yorkshire, East Midlands sort of borders. And it touched quite a lot of you. A lot of you are quite moved by it. And my favourite contribution was because it's such a beautiful thing to say. When they were active, you'd have these big billowing clouds of white steam coming out of the top of them. And imagine telling your kids that they were cloud factories. Isn't that a lovely thing? I thought so.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Shall I run through or let's wait and see whether you need any reminders of what still needs answers. Jack's in St Albans. Jack, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
So it's the tins and the tin openings.
Yes.
So it's historically one of costs. So where the product was targeted to be cheaper on the shelf, they would use the one where you got to open it with a can opener rather than a ring pull.
Why? Why didn't they? Because they said they'd make more money if everything if there were no ring pulls at all.
So when the ring pull was introduced, they were more expensive, so that they are a more expensive piece of packaging and a way to do it. So if you're trying to cut pennies everywhere to make products as cheap as possible on the shelf,
then nothing would have a ring pull on it.
But then when brands have tried to premiumise to make it.
Oh, so it makes it a fancier offering. It makes it a fancier offering. Oh, I've got ring pulls on my tuna. I've got ring pulls. It's a bit hyacinth bouquet. We have ring pulls on our tuna.
And it's all about sort of that making the consumer experience better, and people apparently really like the ring pulls.
Qualifications?
Used to work in packaging team for one of the UK's biggest retailers.
Love it. What is the reason why some tuna does have ring pulls and some tuna doesn't? The tuna that doesn't will be cheaper, probably.
Yeah.
So I'm buying the one with the ring pull on it. I'm buying the more expensive one. It's got a ring. It's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Has it got a ring pull? Is it more expensive because it's got a ring pull on it, or has it got a ring pull on it because it's more expensive?
Exactly.
But so if I'm a bit of a fancy pants and I don't want to buy the value range, I'm going to buy the one with a ring pull on it.
Yeah, but some companies will just go for everything with a ring pull on it because they may just get a bulk offering that's cheaper.
So it's got nothing to do with what's in the tin in terms of like health or hygiene or anything. Oh, lovely stuff. And qualifications are strong. And a round of applause for Jack, please. 12:49. We've got a problem, haven't we, with who wins the game? Two contenders here. Two very strong contenders. Jacob's in Edinburgh. Jacob, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
To what?
So it's an answer to the question about distinguishing between apes and monkeys and why people...
Why is our society so contemptuous, ignorant, so ambivalent about the distinction between apes and monkeys?
Well, James, in a certain sense, the question itself was based on a false assumption.
Whoa, hang on. I'm going to do something I never do. I'm going to ask your qualifications before you give me the answer, because I can hear Dave. I can hear steam coming out of Dave's ears.
So I have a PhD in evolutionary biology, James.
Yeah, carry on then.
So the way the problem with the question is that although the caller did correctly name the great apes, although he excluded humans from that, so we are also a type of great ape. But apes are themselves a subtype of monkey. So apes are, in a technical sense, actually monkeys. And the reason for that is that taxonomists, or in the field of taxonomy, so that is the field of naming animals, it's based on the evolutionary relationships between those animals. And because apes are descended from the common ancestor of all monkeys, that means that we should technically regard apes as a type of monkey. That's exactly the same reason why we should regard humans as a subtype of ape, because we are descended from the common ancestor of all great
So in a
apes.
way, the answer about the question about the distinction, the answer is because the distinction isn't quite as deep and significant as Dave thought it was.
Well, perhaps. I mean, that's not to say that it's not important to distinguish what apes are. So, apes do have certain key features that are specific to apes, but they also share the common the features that are common to all monkeys.
Right.
So all
apes are monkeys, but not all monkeys are apes.
Exactly. That's
exactly what I thought. I did hint at that, but Dave didn't like it at all. And you've got a PhD in evolutionary biology. I didn't ask Dave what he said. How do you pronounce the B word?
The B word. Sorry. Say again.
The B ape. The ape that begins with B. How do you pronounce it?
The B ape. Bonobo.
Bonobo.
Sorry.
He said it better. He said it better. So you might be right, but Dave said bonobo.
Bonobo. But bonobos are very closely related to the common chimpanzee, and they're each other's sister species. And then the species that they're next most closely related to is us as humans.
Gosh, well, you live and learn. Round of applause for Jacob there. I think that answered. No, thank you. I think that answered Dave's question. Although I've got a feeling he won't be over the moon, or possibly even satisfied. Joe's in Berlin. Joe, question or answer?
Yeah, it's another unsatisfactory answer to your question, I'm afraid.
What?
To the AI question.
What is consciousness, and can a computer ever achieve it?
Exactly right. So we've already kind of surpassed the question of solving consciousness, right? We already have systems that can solve the Turing question, which is this original problem that was proposed by Alan Turing to decide if a computer was conscious. And
what was the definition again?
It was that you could sit in a room with a terminal in front of you and have a conversation with this computer, and you would leave the room convinced that you were talking to a person.
Yeah, that's not necessarily. I might be the Turing test, but that could just
exactly
be,
right. But the problem is now that the window's moving over and over and over again. So the problem is with the definition of consciousness and what we expect of a person to be and what consciousness means, and that's the challenge, right?
Yes.
And the interesting thing that the question asker had, which was when they brought it back to the foundations of the brain, and the original ideas for the machine learning systems that we have today were founded on this idea of break it down to one little piece of your brain and work from there. So that's why we have these neural networks that are based on the brain.
Okay, so we don't know really yet whether it's ever going to happen completely, because we don't know exactly what final definition of consciousness we're working from.
But you could have a perfectly lovely conversation with ChatGPT today.
No, I know I could, but I wouldn't think it was conscious in any sense, because it has learned. Well, so have we. So there's something that we are before we learn anything that is consciousness. I am aware of my own existence. Is a computer aware of its own existence?
But the question...
If you say, well, if you ask ChatGPT, do you exist? What does it say? A million people are doing that.
It will come up with what it thinks is the most likely thing you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. That's not consciousness.
From the outside,
that's being a Conservative Party candidate. That's not being conscious.
Yeah. But when you observe it from the outside, you have no way of looking into why it said that.
Oh, I'm just more confused. This is how I used to feel when I was doing my philosophy degree, Joe. So literally this exact same feeling, sitting in there and going, what, man, consciousness, whoa.
But what would it take for you to accept the system you're talking to had a consciousness?
I don't know.
Aside from a revolutionary, economic plan for...
An original idea?
That involved torturing everything in the span of...
An original idea?
A couple of weeks.
An original idea.
But how would you even know that?
I don't know. This is what I mean about how I used to fill in my philosophy lectures. I don't know.
I mean,
why are you getting cross with me? I don't know anything.
But
I know that I don't know anything, and therefore I'm conscious.
An original idea could be come up with out of nowhere.
Cogito ergo sum, mate.
You can absolutely come up with an original idea out of nowhere.
Cogito ergo sum. That's hard. Cogito ergo sum, innit?
That's original. That sounds amazing.
Well, it's not original. I think it's Descartes' definition of consciousness, or at least existence. Have a round of applause. I followed about 40% of that. Clever fella, eh? 12:56 is the time. This is funny. I mean, this really got me, Chris. He wrote, I'm not even going to explain this, because if you heard the call, you heard the call. If you didn't, you didn't. Chris has just written, Dave's got a lot of apologies to make. Jamie's in Christchurch. Jamie, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on, Jamie.
The answer is to the water that you fill up your bottle with.
Oh, yes.
Basically, it's to do with the temperature range of how safe the water will be to drink.
Okay.
So anything below 20 degrees and anything between around 45 to 47 degrees.
Yeah.
So it's sort of classed as stagnant water, and you have Legionellas grows in them temperature range, and so anything between 20 and 47 can potentially kill you. It's basically stagnant water then.
Yeah, but that's only temperature. How long can you keep it in a bottle below 20 before it becomes problematic? Answer forever.
Below 20, it stops it growing.
So it's fine forever?
Well, not forever. I wouldn't want to...
Well, I wouldn't either, but it's just going to taste a bit bottly. It's going to taste a bit bottly, isn't it? But it's not going to do you any harm.
It could do.
Could it?
Yeah, I mean, I work in a care home and I have to flush any...
Steady. People are having their lunch.
Twice a week.
Right. Oh, do you? Oh, because of Legionella. All right. So we don't know. I mean, it's a real how long is a piece of string, but you've certainly educated us, Jamie. Would you like a round of applause?
Yes, please.
There we go. Marvellous. Thank you. And well done. Chloe's in Richmond. Question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Chloe.
It's about...
it was almost Carry On Cleo, that, wasn't it? But it was Carry On Chloe. Sorry, carry on, Chloe.
It's in response to the question about whether or why you...
Is Anne-Marie forgetting English? Is she forgetting English as she learns German?
She's not entirely, but she is a little bit. So there's two things going on. One is the idea that language is not just a set of words that you use to describe the world, but it's actually a thought process.
Yeah.
And the language you speak kind of influences the way you see the world. Not obvious things like, oh, that's a house, that's a car, that's a dog, but kind of concepts. And the other thing that's going on is this idea of what you call the living language, which is the language that you're sort of speaking day to day to communicate with people around you, to ask for what you need or whatever. And if that's your current language, even though it might not be the language that you learned, say, as a child, your native language, whatever language that you're speaking in sort of takes back.
Oh, you're brilliant. Qualifications? Okay. No, you've got it. You've done it. You're over the line. That's beautiful.
One more thing to say is that it's why you...
Oh, I knew it. The phone line's gone. Have a round of applause. Can I do a poem? Can I do a quick poem? Of course. Because this is beautiful. This is about the cooling towers. I was talking to James Graham about yesterday, and this is rather sweet because Alan has sent me a poem by his cousin, who is indeed a professional, and he wrote a poem about the cooling towers called Summer Clouds. The cloud factory standing next to the black as coal road that twists and winds its way like a frozen river spews out grey, venomous clouds that threaten harm and dampen spirits. I've heard it said they've closed the factories. That makes summer clouds. They're nice.
Very nice.
We're going to talk about poetry on the programme tomorrow as things stand, but now it's time for me to say, who's the winner? Well, it's Gavin or Dave. It's Bonobo or Gavin, the bloke who learnt sign language to pull a girl. It's got to be Dave. It's got to be Dave. Sorry, Gavin, it's Dave. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including podcasts about bonobos. Download now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Sawbrook, but now it's time to focus.
James O'Brien on LBC.